हेलो। देर मे बी असं लिहू त्यामध्ये शेवटी की डिफरंट
Hello everyone and welcome to today's national webinar entitled Identification, Referral and Management of Children Suffering from Severe Acute Malnutrition. I, Dr. Priyanka Parikh from Department of Clinical Nutrition, MGM School of Biomedical Sciences, Navi Mumbai, take this opportunity to acknowledge our patrons, Honorable Vice Chancellor, MGM Institute of Health Sciences, Dr. Shashank Dalvi, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Nitin Kadam, Registrar Sir, Dr. Rajesh Goyal, Director, MGM School of Biomedical Sciences, Dr. Mansi Thakur. I also welcome our acclaimed speakers, Dr. Anuradha Khadilkar, Dr. Suparna Ghosh, and Dr. Arun Agrawal, who will enlighten us with their talk. A warm welcome to all the delegates who have joined for this webinar. In order to bring nutrition to the center stage of the National Development Agenda, Government of India launched Poshan Abhiyan, a multi-ministerial convergence mission with a vision to address malnutrition in a targeted approach to ensure community mobilization and bolster people's participation. Every year, the month of September is celebrated as Rashtriya Poshan Maha across the country. This year, we are celebrating the third Rashtriya Poshan Maha to address the problem of malnutrition among young children and mothers. We, Department of Clinical Nutrition, initiated this activity along with NSS of MGM School of Biomedical Sciences. I consider it my great honor to request Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir to address the audience. Anika, share the slide introduction. Sir is a community medicine specialist with more than 39 years of experience in government medical colleges, Maharashtra. He has successfully completed the term as Vice Chancellor of Pravara Institute of Medical Sciences, deemed to be university from 2012 to 2017. He worked as a principal investigator for the project on use of pentavalent vaccine in multicentric study at Serum Institute of India, Pune. He has worked on many inspection committees of MUHS, Nasik, DMER Mumbai, and MCI New Delhi. He is the winner of Shardini Dhanukar Best Teacher Award of MUSH Nasik in 2010 and Rajiv Gandhi Education Excellence Award for Outstanding Achievement in the year 2012. So welcome, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Priyanka Madam. Our patron, Dr. Nitin Kadam Sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mansi Thakur, Director of SBS, Priyanka Madam, in charge of Nutrition Department under the Biomedical School of Sciences of MGM Institute of Health Sciences. I am really happy to talk with you on this particular occasion of inauguration of this particular webinar. And the topic for the inauguration is a very apt, that the identification, referral and management of children suffering from severe acute malnutrition, SAM. The SAM term is in picture since last many years, and we are working on that particular program. These schemes and as well as those problems, those are really persisting. The many various studies, those are also going on. The UNICEF sponsored program and the intervention the Government of India launched this particularly the Poshan Abhiyan, and in the year 2018, our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi ji, has declared the September month to celebrate as Poshan Maha. This is the third consecutive year of Poshan Maha celebration with the theme of identification, referral and management of children suffering with severe acute malnutrition. I am very happy that our institute and as well as the nutrition department every year is celebrating this Ocean Month. Last year also we have arranged the conference, particularly in the similar months. But in this particular year, we are also facing another challenge, the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, instead of in person, we have organized the webinar and the discussion on this particular topic. As such, this particular COVID-19 pandemic, as per the news items, this problem of severe acute malnutrition has increased to some extent. I am very happy to see the list of eminent speakers that the department has called for this particular program. Dr. Anuradha Khadilkar, to whom I personally know, Dr. Suparna Ghosh, and Dr. Arun Agrawal, a professor of community medicine from PGI Chandigarh. So I am sure these eminent speakers will surely give the justice to the topic, and all the participants will enjoy and get benefited with this particular webinar. My best wishes to this particular webinar. Thank you very much for calling to this particular inaugural ceremony of this particular webinar. Thank you, madam. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words and encouragement. Without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Anuradha Khadilkar, ma'am. She is the Deputy Director, Hirabai Kausji, Jahangir Medical Research Institute, Jahangir Hospital, Pune. She is working as Consultant Pediatrician, Jahangir Hospital and Jahangir Clinical Development Center, Pune. She has more than 180 publications in index journals. She has completed over 50 research projects and over 500 presentations in state, national, and international conferences and 30 awards for paper presentations. Ma'am has guided more than 20 PhD students, and her area of interest are nutrition, growth, endocrine disease, vitamin D, and bone health, and type 1 diabetes mellitus. Ma'am is going to talk on identification of SAM. I would request all the participants to put their questions in the chat box. We will take the questions post each session. So over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Dr. Priyanka. Honorable Vice Chancellor, respected senior faculty of MGM, and Dr. Priyanka. Thank you so much for having me here today. And without further delay, I'll share my screen and we can start. So I'm going to look into the identification of the severe acute malnutrition, SAM as it is called. Dr. Priyanka has already kindly introduced me. Now, in SAM, we generally describe the children are from 6 to 59 months, which is 5 years of age. And severe acute malnutrition is defined as very low weight for height or weight for length. The second parameter is very low mid-arm circumference. And lastly, presence of clinical edema, that is pitting edema or puffiness. So it is more indicative of short-term nutritional deficit. I will actually take you through each of these concepts as we go forward. But a child may have low weight for height or weight for length, may have low mid-arm circumference, or may just have pitting edema and still may be called as a SAM child. You know that the WHO describes them as moderate acute and severe acute malnutrition. So we are going to look at severe acute malnutrition, which means that the standard deviation of weight for height, the amount of weight a child has for his height, is less than 3 standard deviation. I will walk you through this a little bit later again. Then presence of edema or puffiness, and presence of visible wasting or mid-arm circumference under 11.5. Now, um, while we are looking at SAM today, I'm just going to briefly touch on MAM also, which is between -2 to -3. I have always believed that don't wait for the child to drop under -3, because it's very difficult to pull back a child once he or she is under -3. So when the trajectory, when the child is actually going down, is the time that you really need to pick the child up as suffering from malnutrition. So just to give you a bit of a picture, the child on the left that you can see is a stunted child. A stunted child is a short child. So what a short child means is that this child has probably suffered from chronic malnutrition. So height is something that does not change very rapidly, though we'll come to this, that the growth rate is very fast in children. The second child in between is a normal weight child. You can see that young children normally look a little bit chubby. And the one on the right is unfortunately a very wasted child. You can see that he has very little subcutaneous fat. If you look at the thighs, you will see there's hardly any fat there. So this is about the child on the left is stunted, so short. The child on the right is wasted. So these are children of the same age. The left one has chronic malnutrition. The one on the right has acute on chronic malnutrition. I'm also going to just touch here once that we always talk about from 6 months to 59 months. But if a child has severe acute malnutrition under 6 months, that is from 0 to 5 months, how do you define that? So that is also defined by weight for length, that is less than -3 z-scores, or the presence of pitting edema. Now, though we largely talk about older children, and I'm sure you know the reason, because up to 6 months, babies are generally exclusively breastfed, and Indian babies also, when they are breastfed, even of the low socioeconomic class, tend to do quite well. That's why we talk more of malnutrition in the older years. But if you see malnutrition under 6 months of age, this is how you define it. And although the treatment is actually quite similar, in very young children, as a routine, we would prefer to hospitalize the baby because treating these babies is slightly hard. So the red flag has to be raised slightly quickly in a baby who's less than 6 months old. Now back to wasting under 5 years. So we all know that it is very common right now. The Vice Chancellor has also spoken about it. So global prevalences are around 7.7%. But if you look at this map of India, now this is the NFHS, this is from the NFHS report. And the red is obviously the wasting. And as you can see, in most states, the wasting is quite high. And here you can see it is around 20 to 21%. So 21% means 1/5 of the children under 5 years are wasted, which is really, really a very big number. So to identify SAM, you need to ask history. Obviously, that is something that all healthcare workers do, whether the child is eating, how the child has landed in this position, what was the birth weight, has the child been sick. I'll come to that once again. Then anthropometry, which is the bit that I'm going to mainly focus on today. And then there is the clinical examination. So in history, normally we look at family circumstances. We look at whether, what kind of foods and fluids the child is taking. Breastfeeding history is very, very critical. You look at what the usual diet is. Now, one of the biggest problems that you see from around 6 months to say 1 year or 1.5 years is that very little extra complementary feeds have been started. The baby is only taking breastfeed, and after 6 months it's really not enough. That's why the WHO says that you must start complementary feeding after 6 months of age. Then you need to know duration and history of diarrhea, vomiting, whether there is dehydration, and dehydration will give you eye signs. Also, amazingly, babies who are very malnourished also happen to have very poor appetite. They're apathetic. They can have ulcers, they can have a chronic cough. So these are the things that we as doctors, actually, this is the history that we would record in a malnourished child to find out the reason for the malnutrition and to find out the extent of malnutrition. Now, next bit is growth monitoring, which is, the bit that I'm going to concentrate on most. So growth monitoring is a very essential part of child survey to find out about poor nutrition in children. And it alone has been shown to improve children's health and reduce mortality and morbidity all across the world. And that is why it has really been put forth as one of the most important things in identifying severe acute malnutrition or malnutrition in general. Here, I'd just like to tell you, I know that you all are largely aware of this, that the reason why we concentrate on the first 5 years or the 1,000 days is because the growth rate is really, really fast in the first 5 years of life, particularly in the first 3 to 4 years. So as you can see, what is on the top is the height or length. So in the first year, a child grows a whopping 25 centimeters, in the second year, 12 centimeters, and in the third year, 8 centimeters. Similarly, the birth weight is anywhere between 2.5 to 3.5. Generally, these are the rates of growth of a child on day-to-day basis, so that generally by 1 year of life, the child has actually tripled his weight. So if on an average, a child is around 3.5 kilos at birth, it's quite likely that the baby might be 9.5, or even 10 kilos at 1 year of age. Now, the reason why I have pointed this out is that because the growth rate is so rapid, any insults in these times will mean that the child will fall back also very rapidly. So if a child is actually at 8 months or 9 months of age, if a child goes into SAM, you can see that the growth rate really goes down. One more thing I'd like to point out here is that often it is said what you lose in infancy, you can make up during the second growth phase, which is during puberty. But it is totally untrue. What is lost in infancy is lost forever. The only thing that you can do in puberty is prevent more of a loss. So our attempt should be that all children are as well nourished as possible in the first 5 years of life. So how do you do monitoring of growth? So obviously anthropometry is the biggest tool. So here for SAM, I'll concentrate on weight, height, and mid-arm circumference. So why do we use anthropometry? Obviously it's inexpensive, it is non-invasive, you don't need to do any blood tests. It's very easy to use by health professionals, and also it gives you an assessment of size, proportions, and nutrition of the human body or a child. So though it is inexpensive, it cannot be done without training and without the right equipment. So it is not something that an untrained person can do without the equipment. The equipment is very, very critical. So if you look at the weight, that is what is most widely used. In fact, even today, when babies are born in so many places, only if we are lucky, the weight is recorded. If the baby is born at home, even that may not be recorded. But usually what is most commonly recorded is the weight. So when you record the weight, plotting it on a chart is important. It is a very important indicator of nutritional status. It can help you to understand the nutritional interventions, but remember that it doesn't account for height. This is a very important pitfall in children, more in children than in adults, because children continue to grow. And say you have a 5-year-old who is 108 centimeters and who is 10 kgs, and you have a child, a 5-year-old who is 120 centimeters and who is the same weight, then you know that the one who is taller is likely to be much thinner at the same weight. So because height is not adjusted for, we really need to take height or length in children. So these are the equipment that you actually need to use. You can, in very little ones, you use a beam balance. Then you can use bathroom scales are not very accurate. And you can even use spring machines are often used in the field condition. The important thing to remember is to calibrate your weight scales periodically, because it should not happen that your weight scale is showing 1 kg more, and in a baby who is 3 or 4 kilos, 1 kilo is 1/3 or 1/4 of the weight, and you could get your readings and hence your interpretation really wrong. Now if you look at the height or length, so like we discussed a little while ago, this is an indicator of past or attained nutritional status. It is relatively insensitive to rapid changes. So for instance, if a little one, say a 2-year-old, has a very bad infection and is sick for a month, his height will remain the same, but the weight will drop a lot. So weight is a better indicator of rapid loss or gain in the nutritional status. But the height or length is a good indicator of chronic debilitating illness. Now, over 2 years, generally we take height with the child standing, and that is called we use an instrument called a stadiometer. When the child is lying down before 2 years of age, you need to use an equipment called infantometer, and you really need more than one person to measure the length of a young one or an infant, because you have to, as you can see, you have to hold the head, you have to hold the legs, and then you have to take the height. So when taking height, you must be extremely careful, because without the right equipment, you could go really wrong. These are the equipments that we use: the infantometer, the stadiometer. The one in between is a portable one. This is also a portable one, and we also have a wall mounted one. So these steps are always placed close to the stadiometer, because you're supposed to actually assess the reading at the eye level. So if there is a tall person coming, we normally get on to a step and then look at how exactly tall the person is. The next criterion is the weight for length. So one of the most important reasons for using weight for length is that it is age independent, and it expresses the weight as a fraction of the weight for age or weight for height, and it has found to be a sensitive indicator of current nutritional status. And it is also less variable with age and ethnicity. So that is why the WHO has actually advised that we use weight for height as the first indicator for severe acute malnutrition. So now you've measured your child, you had this good equipment, and then what do you do? To interpret anthropometry in children, you have to compare it with appropriate age and gender matched controls. Now, this is one of the reasons why it is often hard to actually quickly judge whether a child is, undernourished, overnourished. Say somebody asks me that, oh, my 5-year-old is 12 kilos. Can you tell me whether my child is normal or not? So I would prefer to put the child on a growth chart before I say whether the child is normal or not. So under 5 years of age, we use the WHO charts for plotting growth. I will tell you a little bit about that as we go forward. So these charts go from 0 to 59 months, that is 5 years, and it's blue for boys and pink for girls. What are the components of the growth chart? You have two axes, that is the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, the y-axis, which is the vertical axis. Generally, on the x-axis, you have the age, except if it is weight for height, in which case you have the weight. And on the y-axis, you have the height. You have a grid in between, so you can plot easily. And of course, I told you that the pink is for the girls. Some important concepts when you're plotting for individual children is that please put dots and don't put big flat blobs. Otherwise, next time, especially, if you measure the child again in 3 months' time, then it is very hard to actually know what was the height last time and what is it today. Write the patient's name, date of birth, enrollment number, whatever your identifier is on top of the page. If possible at all, write the parent's height, because the parent's height will, influence the child's height. By this, I mean, if there is a 2-year-old, one 2-year-old's father is 6 feet and one 2-year-old's father is 5 feet 2 inches. So then you would expect the 6 feet father's 2-year-old to be a little bit taller than the other one. That is why knowing the parent's height is very important. Now, to the next step. Sorry. So if you actually want to look at Sam, ma'am, how do you do it? Right. So now this is a boy's growth chart. What you see at the bottom is the weight. This is the head circumference and this is the height. On purpose, the WHO has put it all on one chart so that on one chart, your child can be plotted and you know where the child stands. Okay. Now, this is the 50th percentile or the average. This is the 97th percentile or the highest percentile. So this is the upper limit of normal. This is the average, and third percentile is the lower limit of normal. So normally a child would vary from height, weight, whatever parameter you see, it would go from the third centile to the 97th centile. It isn't necessary that all children will always be on the average. Now, under the third centile, you see one more red line. This is the first percentile or the -3Z score. So that's the one that you actually require to diagnose the child has SAM. So if a child has weight for height under the third percentile, or if the child has height for age, as you can see here, under the first percentile, or under the 3Z score, -3Z score, then the child has severe stunting. So that is the meaning of these 4 lines. Now, this is a weight for height chart, which is more relevant to today's talk, which is for the SAM. So as you can see, the lowest line is the first percentile or the -3Z score. And what that means is once you go below that, the child has severe acute malnutrition. The yellow line above that is the -2Z score, or roughly the third percentile. Between the -2 and the -3 is the MAM, or the moderate acute malnutrition. And above that, between the third and the 97th, is those children who are within the reference range, or otherwise also called as normal. And above the 97th percentile, if you might have one odd child who is above the 90th percentile, especially in urban areas, and that would be obesity. So when we talk of Z scores or percentiles, the children who are in the middle are in the average. The +2 or the -2 SD, this is the +2 SD, this is the -2 SD. So this is the normal range. Under that is underweight, and if I had drawn one more line here, under that it would have been very underweight or SAM. So if you actually, we always say that it's best that you don't have only one reading on a growth chart. If a child comes only once, it's often hard to understand what is actually the nutritional status of the child. So if you look at the lines on this particular chart, what we would like to do is keep plotting the child every time he or she comes to you. If you look at what we have given on the right, so if a child's line goes down or trajectory goes down, it's very dangerous. Something is very, very wrong. Don't wait at all. Don't wait for the child to go under -2 or -3. If the child's percentile is going down, you know something is wrong. Even if the child's percentile flattens, even then you know that something is going wrong. If the child is growing according to his percentile, you can be comfortable that things are okay. And if the child actually crosses 2 percentiles up, even then I would worry. So when a percentile line crosses 2 percentiles going up, going down, or going flat, I would worry. I'm happier to see a child chugging along on his own percentile. Now, if you see this growth chart, if you see this chart on the right, here I've just plotted a 3-year-old child. So once again, this is the weight, this is the head circumference, and this is the height. So this is a 3-year-old boy who's 82 centimeters and 10 kilos in weight. So here is where you plot the weight, and here is where you plot the height. As you can see, height is under the first centile. This is just a hypothetical patient, something to show you. Okay. So how do you actually calculate the Z score? Say if you don't have a chart, what do you do? So there are various methods of calculating Z scores. There are formulae, but then also the WHO has a software called Anthro and Anthro Plus. Anthro is up to 5 years. Anthro Plus is from 5 to 18, is up to 18 years. You can actually plug in your individual's details, and you can get what Z score the child is at. In fact, it gives you everything. It will give you whether it's in the green zone, red zone. With the smartphones that we have, we can also download the app on our smartphone, and we can do this. Also, you can upload survey data on this, and in a large number of children also, you can get your readings very, very quickly. It is available on this website. You can just look it up. I just have one word of caution here about the WHO charts. Now, though the WHO charts have been advised under 5 years of age, even children from good socioeconomic status are often quite short on these charts. So stunting and wasting are both quite common even in healthy children in India, and that is because in the WHO chart, the children are much bigger than the Indian children that we have. In fact, this was a study that we did, and it was a study on well-off children, and we found that the mean height Z score, mean weight, BMI, and weight for height Z score were all under 0 in well-off children. So that's just, a bit of take it with a pinch of salt. Now to move to the next anthropometric parameter, the mid-arm circumference. So mid-arm circumference is normally taken from 6 years of age to 6 months of age to 5 years. And you know that the UNICEF tapes are available, and they're very, very useful. They already come with the marks of the red, yellow, and green, but the cutoff is 11.5. This is 12.5, and anything above 12.5, you're okay. But this can easily be done by healthcare workers. You may not always, having a stadiometer, having a calibrated weight scale can be hard. But actually, these tapes are very portable. They can be used very easily and can be a quick method of assessing malnutrition, especially in surveys and in the community. So I've just mentioned this, that the mid-arm circumference of less than 11.5 is labeled as SAM. So I have a few cases later on which I can actually, show this to you once again. Now, the third parameter is pitting edema. So what edema really means is swelling. And if you can see, now, in this child, what has happened is, in this little one, the examiner is actually holding down his feet a little bit. And as you can see, these are the pits which are created. So there are various reasons why in a malnourished child, you can get pitting edema. But even if the height and weight are within, so if the weight for height is within the reference range, but the child has edema, then you would probably refer the child and consider him as having SAM. So for referring patients, if the mid-arm circumference is less than 115 millimeters or less than 11.5 centimeters, weight for height Z score is less than -3. So you might put the child on a chart, or you might put the child in your WHO calculator, or the child has pitting edema, then you actually need to refer the child. So in those children who are actually clinically alert or who have a good appetite, you might not want to actually admit them, but they can be treated at home. And I know these are bits that somebody else is going to take over after me. But if you are suspecting any kind of complications in your child with SAM, like this temperature, or you feel the child is breathing fast, or very, very commonly, the child has diarrhea or vomiting, or you feel that child's sensorium is altered, a child is not responding to you, child is looking like he has an infection, then it is best to quickly refer the child, and he will probably need inpatient care. That means hospital care. Now, I have put together a few cases, so as to be able to demonstrate to you what I have been saying so far. In the first case, what I show is just to show you how you can make use of growth charts. Now, this is a baby girl, primigravida mother, which means a first-time mother, baby born at term, which means full-term delivery, was a normal delivery, birth weight was 3.2. As we know, that is completely normal, because generally low birth weight is defined as weight under 2.5 kilos. Length was 49 centimeters, which is quite all right, and head circumference was also within normal range. Then what happened is that at that time, at birth, we plotted the child. Now here, because of the way the presentation is, it is a bit of a blob. I myself have said make smaller dots, but because I wanted to present to you, you can see that here the child's weight is somewhere between the 3rd and 50th, it has come down a little bit. The head circumference is okay, and the height is also okay. The height is between the 3rd and the 50th centile. She was brought back on day 7. That time her weight was 3 kg. So she was weighing less than her birth weight, which was 3.2 kilos. So she was very worried that my baby has lost 200 grams. But we know that generally babies would lose weight and gain the weight back by the 10th day of life. So really this could be completely normal. She came back on day 15 for complaint of loose stools. The weight was 3.1 kg and she had not as yet regained birth weight. We know it's 3.2 kgs. So again, we plot her on a chart, and you can see here, we have actually magnified that a little bit, that the weight has actually gone down a little bit. So we start worrying. What do? Do you investigate? Do you wait? Do you tell the mother something is wrong with your baby? Is something really wrong with the baby? So we follow up. It was a wise doctor. It was a wise mom. So mother was reassured about the stools, because often, as you may know, breastfed babies have golden yellow colored stools. Baby may even pass small amounts of stool 20 times a day. Feeding was reinforced, and she actually came back for vaccination visits at 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 14 weeks, 6 months, and 8 months, which is the normal. And as you can see, the weight has gone up. So we plotted her on the growth charts, and as you can see, after the slight initial drop, the baby has done beautifully. So there was nothing wrong with the baby. She's between the 3rd and the 50th centile. And because we used the growth charts, both we and the parents were reassured and convinced that the baby is completely normal. So growth charts can actually help you to even confirm normality as well as pick up abnormality even at an early stage. Now let's go to case 2. This is an 8-month-old baby and was bought with a concern of not growing well. Weight of 5 kg seems worrying. Length 63 centimeters may or may not be worrying. So let's plot her on a chart. So here is how she looks. The weight seems to be a little bit below the 1st centile. I would look at this closely. The head circumference is somewhere between the 3rd centile, and here the height also seems to be somewhere between the 1st and 3rd, or maybe on the 1st centile. I would worry a little bit about this child, so I plotted her on a weight for height chart. And as you can see, obviously this would be a weight for length because the baby is very small. So you can see that for her 4.5 or her 5 kilos of weight, and I think it's 63 centimeters of height, she's actually below the 1st centile. So the weight for length is below the 1st centile. So this baby is actually a wasted baby, or it is a SAM baby, and I would immediately refer this baby because the weight for height is under the 1st centile. And the second thing is that the baby is really, really young. In a young baby, I wouldn't wait. Now, previous 2 readings were also available for this child. And as you can see that the weight is dropping. Can you see this blue line? You can see that the weight is dropping and the height seems to be maintaining its lower percentile as is. So the height centile was low, the weight was low, the weight for height was under the 1st centile. So obviously this is SAM, and I wouldn't waste any time. I would refer this baby immediately. Now let's go to the 3rd baby. So this is a baby boy who presented at 4 months of age, and mom said he is crying all the time. Weight of the baby was 7 kilos, seems more than okay. Length 56 centimeters. I'm a little concerned. Height 40.5. So as usual, I won't take any guesses. I will plot him on a chart. As you can see, the weight, like we thought, was just above the 50th centile. The head circumference is just below the 50th. But look at what has happened to the height. The height seems to be under the 1st centile. So height is low. The weight and the head circumference seem to be fine. What do we do? So weight is 50th centile. Length for age is under the 1st centile. So it is stunting. Head circumference is okay. And this seems to be a stunted child whose weight is actually normal. 2 previous measurements were available. Birth was 3.6, which is very good. Length was 50 centimeters, which is actually normal. And head circumference was 34.5, which is also normal. At 2 months, for some reason, the baby has not put on much weight, or, this may be a wrong reading. The length seems to be dropping to 54.5. The head circumference is okay. Now, this is what is being seen. You can see that the weight is going fine. The head circumference is also holding on to the centile. But see what is happening with the length. As the child is growing older, he is growing shorter for his age. So this child is actually a stunted child. So as you can see, then we plotted the child on the weight for height chart. And as you can see, the child is actually above the 97th centile. And so the weight for height is normal, maybe even more than you would want it to. So the weight for length is over the 90th centile. So this is not protein energy malnutrition, or this is not SAM, but the length is affected. So this child actually turned out to have congenital hypothyroidism. So his thyroid gland was not secreting enough thyroxine. So even in these circumstances, you need to refer the child immediately. So this was another case just to demonstrate the importance of growth monitoring. Now we have a 3-month-old baby girl who comes for a regular monthly visit. Now this baby was born preterm. So she was born at 34 weeks of gestation, and that too, she was a small for gestational age baby. What small for gestational age means is that for the gestational age, for the amount of time that a baby is in its mother's tummy, the baby's weight was less. So that is small for gestational age. So as you can see, the birth weight is quite low, 1.2 kgs. The birth length is 42 centimeters, and the head circumference was 31 centimeters. Now at 3 months, the baby was 1.9, 48, and 35. Now the reason I have taken up this case is in these circumstances where babies are preterm or they are small for gestational age, the chances of missing out on a SAM are much more, because you sort of assume that the baby, it's okay for the baby to have less weight because he was born preterm or he was born SGA. But where do you plot this child? This is a preterm baby. So what we normally do is we plot the baby on what is called the corrected age. The baby's current age is 12 weeks, but the baby was born 6 weeks early. So we plot the baby on his corrected age, which is 6 weeks. Her corrected age, sorry. So we plotted the baby at 6 weeks or 1.5 months, and you can see this is where she lies. So all the parameters, the head circumference seems to be okay, but the weight is definitely low, as is the length. So what we need to do is plot the weight for length. And as you can see, she is below the first centile or below the -3 Z score. So she has severe acute malnutrition. Additionally, she has an SGA. Because she is so young, my red flags would be up. The child has already come to a doctor, but this is a complicated situation. But the reason why I brought this case up is that in case of premature babies, or in case of babies who are born small for gestational age, it is often difficult to decide whether this baby has SAM or not. That is why I have put this case down. How long do you correct for prematurity? This correction that we did, we actually only correct till 2 years of age. We don't correct after that. Now the next case is a 2.5-year-old girl. She had poor appetite and growth, and this was actually picked up during a health survey. Mother is not sure of what her exact age is, but she was born full term. In such circumstances, when the baby is born at home, we normally ask the mother, was the baby looking like she is normal size? Because these women have normally seen other babies, and she said yes, that the baby was normal sized at birth. So this is the baby. And as you can see, this little one's mid-arm circumference is 11 centimeters and lies in the red zone. So this child was picked up as a SAM on MUSC. But the other thing about this little one is that, can you see her eyes, how bright and alert she is? So she could probably be treated at home. So on this tape, because we have discussed this earlier, because the red, yellow, and green zones are already marked, you don't need to go to another chart. to actually see whether the child is malnourished or not can be done by a trained healthcare worker. So this is a rough and ready, a quick assessment of malnutrition. But then we being, normally you would also take the height and weight of the child and see where the child lies. So as you can see, she's 80 centimeters and 7 kilos in weight, which is actually quite low. And I'm guessing her age is around 2.5 years. As you can see, her weight for height is actually quite low. She's under the first centile. So she is a severe acute malnutrition, which you judged on the mid-arm circumference and you cross-checked on your weight for height chart. This is the last case. This child, again, exact age not known in the community, very apathetic child, not smiling, not talking, not crying. So the child was actually, we took the height and weight of the child, and the child's height was 69.5 centimeters. The weight was 7 kilos. And you can see that the child is actually between, do you remember this chart that we saw some time ago? So this is the first percentile. This is the third percentile, minus 3 SD, minus 2 SD. So the child is in between. What do? You look at pitting edema. So when you look at edema in the child, you realize that the child actually has malnutrition. And of course, there is apathy. There are other signs, but a healthcare worker may not be able to judge these. So, but edema is something that a healthcare worker can very easily see. So when you refer patients with SAM for treatment, once again to revise, either you should have less than 11.5, height or length, weight for length less than -3 or less than the red line, or you have pitting edema, then these are the criteria for SAM. And we have just seen that in several cases that I have just shown you. Now, in a child who has edema, so earlier on we used to actually call them as kwashiorkor and marasmus. So in kwashiorkor, the body weight is not that bad, but you see edema, as well as there is some deficit in height, but it is not as bad as it is in the marasmus or the child whose weight for height is very low and who does not have edema. That is why our last case was actually a child whose weight for height was between -2 to -3, but because the child had edema, we were able to peg it as severe acute malnutrition and refer the child. So to conclude, anthropometry is an invaluable tool in the hands of a healthcare worker. Please get into a habit of plotting growth. Now, and in this presentation, we are talking till 5 years, but we actually say continue to plot growth of a child at least once a year till the children are growing, which in girls is around 1 year after menarche or 15, 16, and in boys up till 18 years of age. Growth charts can actually help you to reduce expensive tests, and we use WHO charts under 5 years of age. Remember, growth is very rapid in the first 4 to 5 years of life, which means that when the child can go forward very fast, the child can fall back also very fast. Measurement tools and techniques need to be accurate and calibrated. Meticulous charting of growth is invaluable. It's also inexpensive once you have your tools. If there is faltering of growth, take immediate action, especially if the baby is very young. Delays can result in irretrievable loss. Please remember, don't ever believe in the fact that what is lost during infancy can be made up during puberty. It cannot be made up. Whatever is lost forever. Early identification of severe acute malnutrition is very important in infants and children up to 59 months of age. As I've said multiple number of times, weight for height less than -3, mid-arm circumference less than 11.5, or the presence of an pitting edema should actually point you in the direction of SAM. Under 6 months of age, it will be weight for height under -3 or pitting edema. And please be very vigilant if you see a child under 6 months of age and an admission is preferable. Thank you so much. Always chart growth. Thank you. So we can't hear you, Dr. Priyanka.
Hello. Tell them to unmute now.
Yeah, we can hear you now. We can hear you.
Okay, fine. Thank you, ma'am, for such an informative session. It will be really helpful for us to assess the SAM among Indian children. We realize the importance of early identification and importance of growth monitoring. So now I would like to invite Ms. Elaf for questions. Elaf, over to you. Elaf, now you can ask the questions.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the first question is that what is the impact of COVID-19 and the identification tools of SAM?
So actually what has happened is that in most areas right now, the screening for SAM is not going on. So the health systems have definitely been affected. And as you know, a lot of these surveys are done on house to house basis. So they're not being done. And yes, so right now our SAM monitoring is suffering. It is suffering.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Ma'am, another question which was there was recently MSF has developed a new universal MUSE strip, which is awaiting its validation. So, ma'am, the question is that, and it is a 25 strip. So the question is that, is it going to face any challenges when it comes to use in the field?
I don't think so. See, the main reason why it is so useful is that it comes with cutoffs. So if the current strip also comes with cutoffs, we are good, because I haven't seen the strip. The reason why they can quickly pick up children as under 11.5, between 11.5 and 12.5 and more than 12.5 is because it is marked. It is marked. But I mean, to take your question a little bit further, what is happening now is, as you can see, we have a single cutoff under 5 years of age, and that itself is being challenged now, because 11.5 is there at 7 months and 11.5 is there at 5 years. So that is now being questioned. So maybe they will answer it in the new tape. I don't know. But if the cutoffs are there, shouldn't be much of a problem. Shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for addressing the queries.
So,
Over to you, ma'am.
What I think this can be one of the research question also. We can develop such kind of cutoffs for the other age groups like 7 months and.
So right now we are supposed to use the same cutoff. So there are a few papers which have actually mentioned this, that we need to up the cutoffs, to increase the cutoffs.
Yes.
In some of the work that we ourselves have done, what we have found is that the mid-arm circumference doesn't actually go very well with the BMI in Indian children. The body composition is different in different ethnicities. So we have found that you need, for a lower BMI, the MUSE is actually higher. So, this question, yes, it is a research question. What you say is right. And there are very few Indian papers on that. This.
Even ma'am, we are waiting for your papers and also just to give us the guidance for growth monitoring and all. So earlier also we have referred your studies for module formation and also in future we are waiting, and if possible, ma'am, you please guide us for such kind of research.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. It was very enlightening for us, and it was very informative for us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. So now I welcome our second speaker, Dr. Suparna Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh holds a master's and PhD in foods and nutrition from Delhi University. Currently, she is working at IIPS Delhi Public Health Foundation of India as a faculty and head community nutrition. She is a qualified accredited. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Huh. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. Dr. Ghosh holds a master degree from PHFI. She is working in PHFI as a faculty and head community nutrition. She is qualified accredited practicing dietitian and accredited nutritionist in Australia and has more than 24 years of experience as a clinical, academic, and research nutritionist. She is an intermediate fellow with the Wellcome Trust, DBT India Alliance, and is leading the research work titled Dietary Diversity and Nutritive Value of Indigenous Foods in Addressing Food Security and Nutritional Status of Vulnerable Tribal Communities of India. She has worked as a consultant in Planning Commission of India. Her research focuses are nutritional status and dietary practices of women and children in the vulnerable communities like urban slum and tribal groups. Her other research interests include studying food and nutrition policies for prevention of chronic diseases and a special interest in working with children having inborn error of metabolism. Ma'am is going to talk on indigenous food sources and nutritional status of tribal children and promotion of Nutri Garden. So welcome, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Hello, Priyanka.
Hello.
Am I audible and visible? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
you're audible.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Priyanka, and good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon, ma'am Khadelkar, and it was really enlightening to listen to you, ma'am. We have always been reading about your work, and I work extensively in the area of child malnutrition. We coordinate courses and workshops, and there is a lot of mention of your work, your growth charts, and others while we are, communicating with our workshop delegates from across India as well as Maharashtra. So it's a pleasure listening to you for the first time, though. Okay, so firstly, good afternoon to all of you, and a special thanks to MGM School of Biomedical Sciences, especially Priyanka, for inviting me to this national webinar on identification, referral, and management of children suffering from severe acute malnutrition as part of the third Rashtriya Poshan Ma. And I would say these are indeed unprecedented times when we are physically distanced, yet we are socially connected. In fact, the third Rashtriya Poshan Ma has been repositioned from conventional to digital mode. And today, what I have chosen to speak on is about my work, which I have been doing with the tribal communities of Jharkhand. And this kind of work has a lot to do with community initiatives for prevention and management of malnutrition in children. These are relevant for children who have severe acute malnutrition as well as those who have moderate acute malnutrition and who would go into the vicious circle of severe acute malnutrition and going back to the community and again referred if we are not taking steps to do community-based management by using specific strategies and programs which can improve the overall diet quality of the community. And this has to be done at the community level. Behavior change communication is one important thing where we need to communicate to the community about the importance of infant and young child feeding practices and then create an enabling environment for this community wherein they can access nutrient rich sources at low cost, foods that are locally available, and something which they can grow at their backyard. And here, the importance of Nutri gardens and plantation of nutritious crops with minimal inputs and using indigenous ways can go a long way to address malnutrition at the community level. So I would now like to share my presentation, and Priyanka, just let me know if you can see my PPT. Are you able to see my presentation?
No.
Yes?
No, ma'am.
No, madam.
Okay, let me just try again. So when I'm just clicking on your entire screen and then I'm writing share, can you see it now?
Yeah, now it is visible.
Okay, thank you so much. So as you can see, the topic of my presentation is Indigenous food sources and nutritional status of tribal children, promoting Nutri-Gardens for better nutrition. So as the topic suggests, I'm going to speak about the prevention and management part of severe acute malnutrition, that too at the community level, and that too at a level where we have in the community malnourished children who, before slipping into the severe acute malnutrition level, or the if we say the weight for height of which is below -3 standard deviations, preventing that would require a lot of effort at the community level, and creating an enabling environment with nutritious foods around and a behavior change communication strategy where the mothers are told about the importance of feeding their infants and young children with proper diets in proper amounts, in proper quantity and proper quality, and utilizing local foods can actually go a long way. So to give you an outline, first I'm going to talk about the tribal nutrition in India, then a bit about the indigenous food systems. We have explored these food systems, and there are some specific characteristics, specific attributes of these food systems which can be utilized for better nutrition in children. I'm going to share some significant study findings on indigenous food environment, dietary intake, and nutritional status of children in a particularly vulnerable tribal community in Jharkhand, the Saurya Pahadiyas. And here I would like to show you the level of malnourishment that we are seeing in these communities. And the communities are living amidst a rich biodiverse environment. But somewhere there is a gap between what is being available versus what is being utilized. And there is definitely a lot of neglect or ignorance in terms of utilizing these resources, low cost resources, for the betterment of the community. But as has been rightly pointed out by several economists, we can bring about changes by repositioning the resources. But after a certain level, the impoverished communities would require economic upliftment and other social support systems if we can actually bring about, if only in order to bring about actual changes in their dietary practices or their nutritional status or health for that matter. So yes, encashing or utilizing the indigenous food environment is crucial, but social safety net programs, livelihood strategies, and other nutrition sensitive strategies have to go hand in hand if we want to utilize these indigenous food resources to address malnutrition of these communities. Finally, I'm going to talk about some case studies on Nutri-Garden interventions from India and abroad, where we have seen that these Nutri-Gardens can contribute to nutritional well-being of children, and some government initiatives in India to promote Nutri-Gardens. So this is, in a nutshell, what I'm going to speak about today. Just to start with, to give you a background, India is home to 104 million tribal people, or 8.6% of our total national population are tribals. And according to Article 342 of the Indian Constitution, these tribal communities, who are referred to as scheduled tribes, have primordial traits. They are geographically isolated, they are socially and economically backward. Currently, we have 705 tribal communities in India, out of which 75 of them are particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And if we say who are particularly vulnerable tribal groups, they have specific traits in terms of having a declining or stagnant population, are economically backward, have low literacy rates, and have pre-agricultural level of technology, which the entire gamut of these factors make these communities particularly vulnerable. The highest tribal population in India are in Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Sikkim, Tripura, Chhattisgarh, and Jharkhand. And the primary occupation of these communities usually include shifting cultivation, hunting, gathering, they are pastoralists and are artisans. They have now started migrating a lot also. In the tribal community, we are seeing a lot of migration happening, and they are going to the nearby towns, even the states, far off states, for wage laboring also, daily wage laboring also. They're characterized by extreme poverty, high illiteracy, poor sanitation and hygiene practices, and they have frequent episodes of food scarcity and limited access to health services. All these factors make them really vulnerable. The nutritional status, if we look at it, they have poor nutritional status, and the nutritional outcomes across all the age groups, especially in women and children, are worse. So if we just quickly look at the prevalence, if you see, according to NFHS 4, 43% of the under 5 children in the tribal communities are stunted, that is low height for age. 27 are wasted. So this is higher than the national level wasting rates prevalence, which is around 21%. Here it is 27%, and underweight is 45.3%, and 63% of these children are anemic. Under 5 mortality is at 27.8%. So nutrition among tribal communities were also explored as part of the CNNS report, which has recently come out, and Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey. And according to that, some traits are somewhat encouraging in terms of we do see 70.3% exclusive breastfeeding rate in tribal children. So breastfeeding perhaps is not a major issue in the tribal community. They're still holding on to their traditional practices. The problem is prolonged breastfeeding and delayed introduction of complementary feeding, which is really challenging the health and nutritional status of tribal children. 45.2% reported timely initiation of complementary feeding, whereas in our study we did not see such good figures, and only 15.8% consumed 4 or more food groups. So if we look at IYCF practices, we have certain categorizations given by WHO, which says that if the child consumes 4 out of 7 or 8 of specific food groups which are contributing to nutrients, and we say that dietary diversity is a proxy indicator of dietary quality or the nutrient richness of a diet, we see that these children, only 15.8% of these children are actually consuming 4 or more food groups, and only 9.8% receive iron-rich foods, which is really critical because first 6 months, the mother manages with her breast milk, because breast milk maybe maybe is a poorer source of iron, but is a very highly bioavailable source of iron. But after 6 months, it is important to introduce iron-rich complementary foods to meet the iron requirements. And if we see here, only 9.8% of these children in the tribal communities receive iron-rich foods. And if you look at the national figures, they are not very different. Nationally also, we are not doing deficient, around 15% B12 deficient and 17.2% are vitamin A deficient. Now, moving on to the indigenous farmers, and that is their source of livelihood also. They control a wealth of knowledge of their unique natural ecosystems, including their native foods, which are referred to as the indigenous food systems. And indigenous food systems, since they have been practiced for for time immemorial in history, the practices are found to be sustainable. They are using eco-friendly methods of cultivation. They are not exploiting the forest resources, but they know when to use and how to use the forest, and somehow have been able to strike a balance with the nature in which they are living. So indigenous food systems can provide sustainable solution to the nutrition crisis amongst indigenous and tribal communities, and have the potential to mitigate micronutrient deficiencies as well as risk of chronic deficiencies, and provide food security in times of distress, especially during extreme climatic events. So these are some of the facts which are experiential, which we have seen happening in several communities across the world, amongst the communities who are known to be indigenous to those particular lands. Okay, so now moving on to the work that I'm going to share with you. What I did was, and the story began when I started working in Jharkhand, where we were doing a study on children with severe acute malnutrition, and we were seeing the level of compliance, how these children are going from the nutrition rehabilitation centers or the medical treatment centers and going back to the community and are back referred to us or not. So we were just seeing the entire pathway of referral. And that is when, while following up these children, we went to the community, and in the community we saw these indigenous food sources. And it was really a paradox when we saw that these indigenous food sources were not optimally utilized in the diets of these children. Though they are tribals, though they are considered living in geographic isolation, but the commercial interests of the vendors have taken the processed food to their doorsteps also. So rather than giving them their indigenous rice with indigenous dal, they would prefer to give them biscuits. They would prefer to give them bread. So all the dietary recalls we got were in terms of having biscuits, breads, and according to them, those were the complementary foods for the children. So that is where we found that there existed a paradox in terms of what is available versus what is being used, and a gap in knowledge, or a gap in giving due importance or due value to the treasure trove of indigenous knowledge or the traditional ecological knowledge that the community had. And that led to my next project, which happened 8 years back, where I started exploring the contribution of indigenous foods to food and nutrition security in tribal communities of Jharkhand, where my research question was to see why the rich biodiverse environment of the tribal region are not converted, are not translated into better nutritional uptake in the community, but is, in fact, what is happening is poor nutrition, especially among women and children, when in fact they have access to certain foods. But I would again like to reiterate that only accessing the indigenous environment may not help. Till a certain extent, that is feasible. But we need to have proper immunization of these children, pure drinking water for these children. Open defecation should be discouraged. So we need to not only go ahead with the nutrition specific interventions like promoting indigenous foods in the diets of the children, but also we need to look at the nutrition sensitive interventions in these communities in case we want to see a holistic development of these communities. So I wanted to see what are the factors that are actually hindering the translation of rich, diverse environment into good nutritional status. But currently what was happening is there was rich, biodiverse environment, and there were several factors which were influencing or hindering its conversion into good nutritional status, but was leading to poor nutritional status in the vicinity. The study objectives were to characterize the food environment of the tribal communities of Jharkhand, assessing the nutritive value of indigenous foods that were routinely accessed. And here I would like to say that these people definitely have a treasure trove of indigenous knowledge and huge amount of indigenous foods that are available. But there were foods for which we did not have any nutritive value available with us. So in order to do that, we had to explore the nutritive value or do it ourselves in ISO certified labs, and we had to collaborate with the other laboratories to do these nutritive value assessment of several indigenous foods. And why only that, even identification of those indigenous foods was also a challenge for some of the foods, where we had to prepare herbariums and get their taxonomic classifications also done. So based on the nutritive value, we also then looked at the contribution of indigenous food to nutrient intake and nutritional status of the communities, and finally informing the development of intervention to support indigenous food consumption in these communities. We used a mixed methods approach where, of course, we had to go around and look at the food environment of these communities, interact with the communities, understand their food systems. What is closer to them? Is it a forest which is closer to them, or they are doing shifting cultivation, or are they using several weeds in their vicinity? So we did village transects, we had focus group discussions. Then we did some surveys in terms of household surveys, dietary surveys, did biomarkers assessment in women, not in children, and of course, we did the anthropometric assessment. Now, moving ahead with some of the findings, and here I'm going to share with you the findings from one of the particularly vulnerable tribal community, which was Saurya Paharias. Apart from Saurya Paharias, we are also working with the Santals, the Oraons, and the Ho tribal community of Jharkhand. So first about their foods, we found a diverse list of indigenous foods within this community. Is there an, am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, great. So what we found was a diverse list of indigenous foods within these communities. And guess what? We found 193 indigenous foods. And these were apart from the usual rice, dal, and other things which are available in the market. We found 36 varieties of green leafy vegetables, 43 varieties of flesh foods, 33 varieties of mushrooms, roots and tubers, cereals and millets, several cereals, several indigenous varieties of rice were also identified. Other vegetables varieties of flowers, varieties of fruits and other things, and pulses and other miscellaneous items were also identified. When we looked at the access to food, so we wanted to see how many sources of food they were accessing and whether there was any kind of a relationship with number of food sources accessed versus dietary diversity. And we found that definitely the community accessed more than 2 to 3. In fact, 7 sources of food were definitely accessed, which included agricultural land, kitchen garden, forests, water bodies, livestock, markets included formal as well as informal markets. Mostly they had informal markets or huts. They also accessed the government public distribution system, the food security program. They also had access to supplementary feeding program. So what we found was the access was higher, but the use of these sources in day-to-day dietary consumption was not that high. So they had access to forest, but they were not going to the forest much because according to them, if they have the PDS food, if they have the market nearby, they would not like to, incur a kind of an opportunity cost to go and access food from the forest. And they would give us stories like, it was in the older days that we used to go to the forest in the lean period when we did not have food in the market, we would go and access forest. So some of the rich sources which are there in the forest are somewhat being neglected, I would say. But yeah, these were some of the findings that we had. Now, when we did the nutrient analysis, like almost 84 food items we could identify, 92 food items we could identify through taxonomic classification, and we could get nutritive value of several foods from the secondary data, and we analyzed several foods as part of our study. And what we found is several indigenous foods were rich sources of micronutrients and proteins. As you can see, the rice beans, the sutri dal that they called, was high in proteins, which is but obvious. It's a pulse. Then several fruits were rich in beta carotene. Green leafy vegetables were exceptionally high in beta carotene and iron. We had some of the green leafy vegetables, in fact, had therapeutic doses of iron in it. And there we had to see the toxicity, the anti-nutrient factors present in these foods, which is an ongoing task for us. That's an additional research question we are also looking at, where we would like to see whether such high levels of micronutrients and presence of any anti-micronutrients in these foods have any detrimental effect on health or not. We also found rich sources of calcium. And to our surprise, what we found that animal milk was never a part of the diet of these communities. Children would take mother's milk, and from mother's milk, it was basically going on to a complementary feeding diet, which included cereals, pulses, green leafy vegetables, and most of the calcium in the diets of these communities are available from pulses and several of the green leafy vegetables and some of the flesh foods. However, though we found so many foods, such nice nutrient contents, when we did dietary recalls, we found poor consumption of indigenous foods within the community. This was true not only for children, but also for women. Here I'm going to discuss about women, but about children, sorry, but in women also we found very poor consumption. And as you can see, only 50.3% of indigenous foods were commonly consumed. So out of those 192 food items we identified, only 50% of them were routinely consumed in this community, while the rest were either historically consumed or were underutilized. Moving on to the infant and young child feeding practices, and what did we find? We found around 65% of the women were introducing were introducing breast milk early, by maybe 65% of them. Pre-lacteal feeds were still practiced in the community. Feeding of colostrum was common. Exclusive breastfeeding was 25.9%. Now you may ask me a question, what do you mean by this? Number one is that we did not use the ideal method of assessing exclusive breastfeeding because that has to be done prospectively, not in retrospect. Like till 6 months of age children, you interview the mothers and see whether the child is being breastfed or not. In our community, in our study, we took children from 6 months and above because we wanted to capture complementary feeding and use of indigenous foods. So in retrospect, we asked how many children were exclusively breastfed. What we found was, yes, after 6 months, in 25.9% of the children, mothers introduced complementary feeding after 6 months. However, what we found was 79% of these children were exclusively breastfed for 6 months and beyond. So we found 53.2% of these children were given only breastfeed till 7 months or beyond 1 year. So beyond 7 months, exclusive breastfeeding continued. So our hypothesis of seeing a lot of extended breastfeeding in the community was quite evident. We also saw timely introduction of complementary feeding as 31.3%, and incorporation of indigenous food in the complementary feeding was also seen in 40%. But if you look at the diversity, we saw poor dietary diversity and nutritional intake amongst Saurya Paharia children. How? When we looked at the dietary diversity score, we saw a score of 2, which is really low. The dietary diversity score is calculated when different food groups are included in the diet of these children, and this is calculated from the 24-hour dietary recall. And we found a mean diet diversity score of 2. Only 6.5% of the children consumed 4 or more food groups in a day, and that happened in the younger children and infants, and in the older children, it was around 8% who consumed 4 or more food groups. Higher dietary diversity though. So we had some children who consumed better diets. So those who had better dietary diversity scores had higher intake of most of the nutrients. As I told you previously, diet diversity is a proxy indicator of nutrient adequacy. Okay. Only 40% of the children reported indigenous food consumption in the previous day. I have said that in my previous slide also. And higher consumption of calcium and vitamin A was seen in children 6 to 23 months of age who were consuming indigenous food. And in older children consuming indigenous food, they had significantly higher intake of most of the nutrients. There was weak correlation between indigenous food consumption and dietary diversity, and the reason was obvious because the indigenous food consumption itself was not optimal. It was only 40% of the children who were consuming. Now, if we look at these tables, if we see the dietary diversity score in children, so if you see children 6 to 23 months of age, if the dietary diversity was more than 2, the intake was better and was statistically significant. Same was true for children above 24 months of age who had better dietary diversity, had better nutrient intake, and this was true not only for macronutrients but also for micronutrients. Now, those who consumed indigenous food had better intake in both the groups, 6 to 23-month-old and 24 to 53-month-old children. Those who consumed indigenous food had better intake of protein in the younger age group, and vitamin A and calcium was better in the indigenous food consumer group as compared to non-consumer group. And in 24 to 60-month age children, we found better intake of riboflavin, vitamin B6, vitamin A, that is beta carotene. Mostly they were consuming green leafy vegetables, and calcium and zinc. So we also went ahead and looked at their anthropometric status. And as you can see, we found wasting. Wasting rates were 8.4%, which is higher than the national average. Severe wasting was higher, that is less than -3 standard deviation. And stunting was 24.5%, severe stunting, and severe underweight was also high. All these levels are above the national average. Based on our study findings, what did we do? We understood that the community definitely had a lot of indigenous food resources. Maybe they are not utilizing them optimally. So we went ahead and spoke to the community, spoke to the mothers about what is ideal complementary feeding, what is exclusive breastfeeding, what are the amounts, frequency, and consistency of complementary food that needs to be given, importance of balanced diet, and examples of complementary foods. And to our surprise, the mother knew about several preparations. When we probed a bit, they came up with different, recipes and diets, but there was somewhere a gap between connecting that knowledge to actual consumption in children. One was the time factor, but most importantly, they were not really sensitive towards the needs of these little infants. For them, giving breast milk ad lib was serving the purpose, and maybe 2 or 3 biscuits or a bread, and that's it. When we talked to them about the recipes, they said, yeah, of course we know we may make this during the cultural functions, and this particular green, this just grows on its own and we can just use it. But we use it when we have we don't have enough food at home. Or for example, moringa, the drumstick leaves. They said when there is nothing, we use the drumstick leaves. So somewhere we have to create this link between the traditional ecological knowledge and actual practice and utilizing these foods in the daily diets. And here, to create evidence-based interventions, and based on the sessions while doing the community awareness program, as I mentioned, we found that the community was aware of several traditional recipes using local indigenous foods. But there was low utilization of indigenous foods due to lack of nutrition awareness, opportunity cost of accessing foods from the forest, poor utilization of kitchen garden. Now, what we found, we just walked around in the villages and we saw there were unutilized piece of lands in the backyard. And when we asked, they said that we don't have enough water. In the farms, it's rain-fed cultivation. But for the kitchen garden, we need some source of water to water the vegetable plants. And that's why we are not able to do it. But when we explored several studies, which have been happening across India, especially in Odisha and all, using kitchen water waste, or the water which is being used for washing and other purposes can be utilized for kitchen garden. So such kind of interventions need to be thought about for this kind of community. Exposure to energy dense foods was again a hindrance towards consumption of indigenous foods, because for them, the colorful packages which are available in the local markets, the so-called junk foods, the so-called high fat, high salt foods are more attractive to them because we are paying a money for it. And of course, the food security program in the country is also pushing us towards a monotonous diet in terms of giving us only cereals, maybe oil in some cases. But we need to have systems where vegetables are promoted, where vegetables are subsidized and given to the farmers, or we encourage the farmers, these sustenance farmers, to grow their own food. So, establishment of kitchen and nutrition gardens and dietary incorporation of nutritious indigenous foods can be one of the sustainable solution to reduce malnutrition in this community. We haven't done such an intervention, but I would like to share with you a few case studies, and that will be the last section of my presentation. So what are Nutri Gardens? Nutri Kitchen Gardens or Nutri Gardens garden is the growing of nutrient-rich crops in household backyards or in their vicinity to meet requirements of the family all the year round. In addition to the family's food needs, home gardens can also augment household income, especially for women from the sale of surplus produce. It ensures an inexpensive, regular, and handy supply of fresh foods, mainly vegetables, which are basic to nutrition. And look at these pictures. These are from our traditional communities. And if you see, they are so green and they have knowledge of picking up the edible foods which just grow like that in their gardens, in their farms, in their backyards, in the open areas or wasteland. It is the utilization of that knowledge and incorporation of those foods in their diets, and perhaps growing some of these nutritious foods, have the potential to address malnutrition. So, Nutri Gardens can be a sustainable solution to malnutrition, and communities like our tribal communities have access to natural resources like land and water, but lack the knowledge or give due value or importance to the nutritional property of available and easily cultivable indigenous foods. Hence, Nutri Gardens can be regarded as a sustainable solution to bridge the gap between the available resources and its utilization among vulnerable communities, address undernutrition, especially micronutrient deficiencies, because Nutri Gardens can grow a lot of fruits and vegetables, and the diversity is also possible. Also, create additional revenue generating opportunities for farmer communities. And here are some case studies on NutriGarden interventions. The first one is from Philippines, where they have done this particular intervention in terms of integrated school nutrition model, school garden enhancement using bio-intense gardening methods, supplementary feeding is done utilizing the nutritious produce in the indigenous garden, and nutrition education is also given to the parents and the students for behavior change communication, because they can have a sumptuous school meal, but after all, two other meals are consumed at home. So education and doing by learning or learning by doing is something which is promoted in such interventions. The impact was improved year-round availability of diverse indigenous vegetables. 22 vegetable types were grown, 64% of them were indigenous. And increased use of self-grown vegetables in school canteens was seen, and 28% decrease in underweight in children was also observed. This project was implemented in 27 public elementary schools. Another one is from Brazil, where the school curriculum on topics like recycling, sustainability, and food security. So it is always important to create a stage for such an intervention. We just can't just go wake up one fine day and start growing fruits and vegetables in my backyard. We have to sensitize the community about the importance of it. We have to motivate the community to take up such an intervention. So here we see these examples give us first-hand knowledge of how awareness is first created. Then resource provision of moringa seeds were given to the student, and a school nursery area was created. Nutrition education sessions were given to parents on nutri gardening and use of moringa in the diet. So we just not only grow these foods, we need to teach the community how to use them. Impact was increased environmental awareness, incorporation of moringa in the daily diets, and better attendance and class performance in school. Then we have another study from Mali, where they created vegetable garden for family consumption and market sale. promotion of healthy eating habits and adequate childcare practices through education and awareness, and cooking demonstration. So you see, we create an enabling environment, we motivate the community, we bring about a behavior change communication, because the change that you want to bring about in the community has to happen by the community itself. So the Jana Andolan thing of Poshan Abhiyan can work wonders. Here we talk about community mobilization. We can teach the community, but finally it is the community's ownership. It is for the community to take up such an intervention and make it sustainable within their own resources. Impact again was healthy nutrition practices, marked improvement in diet, and doubling of income. Income also improved if the production was good. Home garden diversification in Sri Lanka is also an example. And as you can see, there was high crop diversity, increased self-employment, and significant improvement in household diversity. Then in Maharashtra, this is closer to our home. In Maharashtra, a project implemented in Melaghat district in households with under 6 children, where they planted different kinds of fruit trees, vegetables, and these seeds were distributed in the house to the households, and regular IEC sessions were done. All households started practicing kitchen garden throughout the year, as opposed to the traditional practice of monsoon season. And effective water management of kitchen gardening was done using wastewater for gardening, and higher household diet diversity also happened. Again, another example from Tamil Nadu. Promotion of nutri gardens in 20 villages in Pennagaram Taluka of Dharmapura district in Tamil Nadu, where around 400 women were trained to establish low-cost, eco-friendly kitchen gardens. And as you can see, they had better harvest, less reliance on market, and use of kitchen wastewater for kitchen garden. We also have Nutri Gardens, another example from the Wara block of Thane district um, in Maharashtra. And the impact was, again, as you can see, people were growing papaya trees, 68% malnourished children recovered, and so on and so forth. The Nutri-Garden initiatives at state and national level, and here we have the Odisha Livelihood Mission, where around 90,000 Nutri-Gardens have been set up in the state by women self-help group. And this year, Uttar Pradesh government has also created a policy initiative called Uttam Poshan Uttar Pradesh Roshan to encourage the development of Nutri-Gardens in all the villages with convergence through different ministries. The Karnataka Horticulture Mission, with the funds from Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, is also developing kitchen gardens called Akshara Kai Tuta in government schools to promote consumption of fruits and vegetables. Tamil Nadu also is promoting roof gardens, and Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, with the help of Krishi Vigyan Kendras, are also establishing Nutri-Smart villages. Now, School Nutrition Garden is a new initiative of the government, and Ministry of Human Resource Development has directed all the schools in rural and urban areas to set up school nutrition gardens. And the main objective is to help address malnutrition and micronutrient deficiency by consumption of freshly grown vegetables, to give children the first-hand experience in nature and gardening, growing your own food, and to enhance the knowledge of children regarding nutritional aspects of vegetables and harmful effects of packaged junk foods. Schools with limited lands will be encouraged to practice gardening in the containers, and boxes, tins, crates, and other things can be utilized. Technical assistance, training, and provision of seeds, saplings, and organic manure will be promoted, and all activities shall be undertaken under eco clubs managed by the school teachers. A huge range of vegetables, fruits, pulses, and medicinal herbs need to be encouraged under this school nutrition gardens. In the conclusion, I would say Nutri Gardens are an indigenous and a sustainable solution to malnutrition and hunger. It can play a critical role in ensuring nutrition security and diversity at schools, at household level, at Anganwadi centers, that can further improve the nutritional well-being of growing children. It is a sustainable strategy, and which we want to reiterate again and again. So we need to use organic ways of utilizing the waste material, the kitchen waste as manure, and using the kitchen waste water. And we have to economize, and we have to make it minimal input, minimal external input, except for the seeds. And these seeds should also ideally be indigenous in nature and should promote the local food varieties in these gardens. The potential to empower rural women in making decisions relating to garden produce, its sale, and incorporation in diets is of paramount importance. So, empowerment is a very integral part of this strategy, and promoting cultivation of indigenous foods in nutrient gardens supported with behavior change communication. And here I talk about my project area, where we want to promote cultivation of indigenous foods in the Nutri Gardens. But with that, we need to support behavior change communication on infants and young child feeding practices. And this can be an effective strategy for improving the diet quality and addressing food security and hidden hunger in the community. Hence, Nutri Gardens are micro solutions, but can have major and long-term impact, and are affordable way of ensuring food security and balanced nutrition in vulnerable communities of India. Finally, I would like to thank my funders, DBT Welcome Trust India Alliance, who are supporting this work that I'm doing with the tribal communities of Jharkhand. And of course, I want to thank the tribal people of Jharkhand, without whose knowledge and insights this entire work was not possible. And of course, my field team and my core team at Indian Institute of Public Health, Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving us knowledge about the indigenous food material, their importance, and how they can affect nutritional status, and how we can promote the concept of Nutri-Garden. We realize the importance of food environment and identification of indigenous food. Now I invite Ms. Elaf. Elaf, you can ask few questions.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, so the first question is that which dietary diversity scale or score you have used in your study?
Okay, so there are several dietary diversity scores which can be used. For women, we had used the MDDW, that is minimum dietary diversity for women. And for children, we had to refer to several other papers which have used the dietary diversity score calculation. And if you want the references, I can share those references with you for calculation purposes of dietary diversity. You can use other dietary diversity scores like the food consumption score by the World Food Program and household diet diversity index. There are several indices available, but for children, we have used a specific reference score which was developed by a team in. I'll just share the reference with you.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, another participant would like to know wasting and stunting in two groups. The first one is users of indigenous food and non-users of indigenous food, the other group.
Okay, so you want to know whether there was a marked difference in wasting and stunting amongst the group which were using indigenous food versus those who were not?
Yeah.
No, there wasn't, because, and that is understood, because our distribution itself of indigenous food consumption was so skewed. And as many studies have pointed out, indigenous foods are mostly attributing to the micronutrient intake. The overall dietary consumption itself, if you see the total energy consumption in the population, it was so low. And translating that into anthropometric indices and finding a difference, it did not come up, and that was very much expected. So we really had a very high level of wasting and stunting in the population, and it was irrespective of indigenous food consumption or not, which was also evident from a very poor diet diversity score of just 2. Okay, so it was basically the dietary intake was somewhat reflected in terms of calcium consumption, vitamin A consumption, and some of the micronutrient consumptions were better. But its translation into biomarkers, which we did not see in children, or translation into anthropometric indices was not evident in this population.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And also the participant would like to know the successful Nutri Gardens in the Indian setting.
So as I said, some of the Nutri-Garden initiatives have really worked well in Odisha, in Maharashtra. It is important to see what outcome indicators they have seen. Have they seen the process indicators? The process indicators will be more and more women started growing having nutri gardens in their backyard. So I think during the initial phase, it is important to see whether women are adapting to those interventions or not. The next thing comes whether these interventions are translated into better intakes in the population. So if we want to look at the dietary consumption pattern of the kitchen garden owners versus those who are not doing kitchen garden is something which we need to look at. But overall nutritional status improvements are documented from some of the case studies from abroad. That has definitely shown that if you have seen the case studies which I have shared, and I've given the references, these are all from Bioversity International website. So you can just look at the data there and see whether there was actual change in the nutritional or the, what should I say, the nutritional status of the children whose family were actually following kitchen gardens or not. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much. Another one is, ma'am, how can we encourage lower income groups to initiate nutri gardens in a feasible way?
Yes, that is where the real challenge is. So the first and foremost thing is to create awareness amongst the lower income group about the importance of local food, the undue value that they are giving to the packaged food, for example. Like I work in urban slums as well, apart from tribals. And in urban slums, I just found that parents were happy to spend 5 rupees, 6 rupees every day in the child's diet to buy those packaged products.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They are encouraging these energy dense foods which are higher in salt, higher in sugar, but with the same cost, they can buy half a kg of green leafy vegetable and feed the child. But it's not easy. Children look at the interesting packages and they get influenced. So what is market doing? Market is influencing the behavior of the community. So as nutrition researchers, as social scientists, what we need to do is think of ways of changing the behavior of the community towards adopting nutritious practices, picking up food which are nutritious. So can we package our green leafy vegetables the way they are packaged, or the junk foods that are packaged, or think of recipes and items which can be distributed through Anganwadi centers but have the freshness, have our holistic, our dietary diverse. So to encourage the people from low socioeconomic group to eat healthy, it's a challenging task. For them, food security is important. To transform that food security into nutrition security and facilitating a discussion with them in promoting their traditional diets, and then they come up, they say, yeah, we have laddus, my mother used to make this can be made with whole grains, used to eat a lot of millets. So we have to bring out that discussion with the community, and then it is possible to some extent to change their diets. However, this has to go hand in hand with economic empowerment, social safety net programs, so that we give them livelihood security. And then, because if I tell them go and fetch things from the forest, they will say we don't have time. There is a lot of opportunity cost to it. There's no money involved, but who wants to go to the forest when with 2 rupees we can buy something? So, this is a whole lot of change in the behavior, but with a unique support system. Like I can see a question on how can we have successful nutrition garden in Indian setting? Well, we have to provide those basic infrastructure, basic resources, basic support system, which can lead to knowledge, technology. All these have to work hand in hand, and we have to have programs which can facilitate this kind of intervention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for addressing the queries.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. You have given us so many ideas to promote the Nutri Garden and to promote the indigenous foodstuffs. Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce our last speaker. Dr. Arun Agrawal, sir. Sir is professor in Department of Community Medicine and School of Public Health at PGI MER Chandigarh with 30 years of public health experience. Sir is member of national and state level committees related to maternal and child health and nutrition. He is the president of Association of Health System Analysis and Strengthening Society. He is having more than 60 publications in good impact fact national and international journals. He is the chief editor of International Journal of Health Systems and Implementation Research. His area of interest are reproductive health, child health, quality of care, micronutrient deficiency, operational research. Sir is going to deliver a session on nutrition policies in India to combat SAM. Over to you, sir. Hello, sir. Hello. 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 Anil sir, can you please unmute Arun Agrawal sir?
Yes, yes, 1 second.
Yeah, okay, okay. He is doing, sir.
So this happens that you are saying hello and I cannot say anything.
So sorry for inconvenience, sir. Sir.
Because my voice control is in your hand. So before we start, I have a suggestion that if you can give a 4-5 minutes break, mobility break to your participants for more than 2 hours, they are sitting glued to the screen. And in the meantime, if you can play some music and people can do some stretching exercise for 4-5 minutes, they let them refresh themselves.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a good suggestion, sir. Definitely next time we will incorporate.
So if they don't want to go out, okay, let them raise their hand like this, okay, and do like this. Okay, are people doing?
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
So they can do like this. Back stretch, forward stretch, back stretch, forward stretch, side stretch, like this, and some neck exercise, sideways, like this, and rotation. Okay. So little stretching for 3-4 minutes. If people want to go out for some mobility for 2-3 minutes, they can go. Otherwise, then we'll start. What do you suggest?
Sir, I think you can start, sir. Yes.
Okay, so the screen sharing you will do or I should do?
Sir, you can do it. Sir, you can do.
Okay, I can do. So the way to do it, open the screen.
Yeah, you have to share your screen only after opening your screen. Sir, you will get the option of screen share. Na? So you just click the option and then share your particular screen.
This is what I'm trying to do. And share screen. And the screen.
Yes.
And then share.
Yeah, sir. Yeah, it's visible, sir. You make it slideshow, no? There is an option. Yeah. You click the slideshow. Yeah, this one. Yeah, it's visible, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm audible and the screen is visible. Good.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I think 2 wonderful sessions. Okay. And let me see whether I complete with those 2 sessions or not. And the screen has been set. The first session, Dr. Anurada, in a very excellent way and through case studies told how to identify clear acute malnutrition and also told to raise the red flag, and especially if the age is less, it's more necessary to raise the red flag very early on, and so that treatment can be done. And in the next session, we learned indigenous food. I was really hoping that probably the consumption of indigenous food leads to some reduction in some of these things, but probably the impact is going to be on the micronutrient deficiencies. But even if there is no impact on all these things, but consumption of indigenous food as such is a very good and healthy practice. At least you know that you are consuming a safe food and not food which is contaminated with so many pesticides and like that. So, although you may not be able to hear the outcome variable to all that, but this practice itself should be promoted. I fully support those ideas. Now, thing is that what should we do when we have identified SAM and what are the nutritional policies related to this? So, after discussing with Priyanka, and I thought that probably because all of you are either established dietitians or budding dietitians. So, the focus of my presentation would be that where can you chip in to do some practice, to do some research, and do some interventions for improvement. And my key message is that when you have learned so many things from today's seminar.
Hello. Hello. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, sir, but your voice is not proper, means some disturbance is coming. So if possible, can you use some microphone or ear?
I was trying to use earphones, but probably your system is not allowing this.
But now your voice is clear, sir. You
Okay, now it is clear. So I have moved up
with your earphones, no?
but earphones somehow.
Now it's better than previous, sir.
You can start, sir.
I can start.
Yes.
So, I mean, whenever I'm not audible, then please tell me so that efforts do not go waste.
Sure, sir, sure.
So, I have raised the yellow flag for Sam Child. So, we start from here that from the first session, you learned how to identify a Sam Child. And then what should we do? The golden message in the first session was refer the child. Refer the child where? Naturally to some hospital. But we have done so many death reviews. We know that whenever somebody is referred, maybe this is a malnourished child, maybe this is a mother who is anemic or whosoever is referred, our health system is not responsive to the referrals. Neither the referral is done in the proper way, nor when someone is referred to a health facility, people over there do not receive the referred person and they do not take prompt action, and these babies and ladies are shuttled from one place to the other like anything, and ultimately they die on the way. That is the reality generally in many states where I have studied or visited or something like that. Giving you concrete example, that if a lady at the time of delivery was detected to be anemic, suppose that lady visited a primary health center. I hope all of you know what is a healthcare system. But because you are dietitians, I'm not sure whether you have read it about or not. Priyanka, can you confirm whether this audience knows about the sub-center, primary health center, community health center or not? Not listening. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, in between, I will keep on asking to know the response, so that you people are awake and I am audible.
Sure, sir. Sure,
So
sir.
when this audience knows about the sub-center, primary health center, community health center or not? let me repeat because answer is not coming. Let me repeat that in the healthcare system, at the peripheral level, there is a sub-center where a health worker, male and female, is there, and some sort of daycare service is provided. And at the village level, generally there is one Anganwadi worker who is looking after food, nutrition, and development of under 5 children and pregnant ladies. And now there are ASHA workers who are not formal workers, who are volunteers. They are paid the incentives or honorariums based on whatever they are doing, and they have huge responsibilities for all the national programs, including for antenatal care, under 5 children, home-based neonatal care, everything. So, and at the primary health center and the higher level is community health center, there are medical officers available. So when we are saying that at the community level, these workers, they identify, they take the weight, they take the height, and they say that this is a SAM child. Now red flag is there, now you go. The question is where to go. Suppose they refer this case to a medical officer. Okay, medical officer at primary health center. That medical officer at primary health center is likely to give something, and then that medical officer will say, okay, go to the next level of community health center. Now, if that child is taken to the next level of community health center, that center again is sort of semi-functional. They will again assess and give something, and they may say, go to the district level where there is nutritional rehabilitation center. Child will be admitted over there. So child is shuttling from one place to the other till it reaches the district level, and district level is no better. These NRCs are functional only at some places. At all other places, these are on paper. There is not enough staff. So they may keep the baby for a day or so, and then they will say, go home. So what it means? That this SAM baby, severe acute malnutrition, remember, the baby is below the last line that Dr. Anuradha showed. And when the baby is below last line, the baby is very, very vulnerable to infections. And the safety period, the window period between life and death is very, very less. And this highly vulnerable baby is being shuttled from one place to the other. So they will die. Now, next, the different scenario is, suppose we presume our health system is responsive and you refer all such babies. You do the calculation. I will not do it here for the sake of time. But if you calculate that how many percentage of our population is under 5 and what percentage are likely to be wasted, and if you refer all those wasted babies to the hospital, how many hospital beds you will require? There are no hospital beds available. So, due to all these reasons, we say that if there is a severe acute malnourished baby, you assess for possible complications. Okay, possible complications. Some of that Dr. Anuradha had already mentioned. Basically, this SAM baby, because would be very prone to infection, if there is some complication, either baby will be breathless or semi-conscious or irritable, or the mother will say, "Bachche ka sharir thanda pad gaya hai, it is cold, clammy," but the baby is not good, it's going down. All these things will come from the mother itself. So if the baby is in that stage, then baby require definitely admission, because practically उस baby की सारी physiology, entire physiology has gone down. Baby has to be stabilized properly. उसके शरीर में ग्लूकोज की कमी है, hypoglycemia if it is there, you have to build that. baby is hypothermic, शरीर ठंडा पड़ा हुआ है ना? You have to warm the baby by providing appropriate clothing, by having appropriate temperature in the room, and then start giving glucose, start giving antibiotics. You have to do all these things immediately so that baby is stabilized. All that can be done in a hospital setting. And then once baby is stabilized, and then you are starting with the special diet which is not very rich in calories and proteins, starter diet, है ना? आप खाना भी खाते हो तो पहले starters मंगवाते हो ना? Similarly, when this baby is in such a bad shape, there is no appetite and all that, so you start building the baby, stabilizing the baby, and then once the baby gets stabilized, then you start giving the calorie rich and protein rich diets. Those are also have specific features of that. We will come to that later. We are not going to go into the deeper details of how to manage that clinically, but you should have something in your mind that what type of things are going to happen in the hospital. But if the baby is not having complication, and one of that example was also given by Dr. Radha, she showed a baby कि देखो ये baby वैसे तो wasted है, but इसका देखो eyes कितना alert है. When you find that the baby is same but is not having complications, is otherwise alert, is okay and having good appetite, then this is the right stage for community-based management of SAM. Okay, so if the baby is having red flag, then these are the options that you have to manage at community or you have to manage at the facility. But the thing is that why this baby is becoming SAM, and many references and examples have been given by Dr. Anuradha itself, and some related to the dietary practices by Dr. Sparna Ghosh also. And we need to know all the policies and programs that should be in place so that the baby does not enter into this SAM phase. And some of that is, this is a sort of a cycle. You can start from anywhere. If you start from here that the baby is low birth weight or premature, such type of babies, if these are not taken care of, will eventually grow into malnourished child. This malnourished child will eventually grow into a malnourished adolescent. And then if there is malnourished adolescent, then this anemic and underweight woman at marriage ultimately, and linked with early marriage also, is going to produce a low birth weight premature baby. So this is a cycle. So this is leading to this is leading to this, and they are reinforcing each other. So if you want to tackle this SAM, you should know how to break this thing. And people say where to start. Should I start at this level, at this level, this level? Where? Because the problem is huge. You have to strike at all the levels, whatever is possible and feasible for you, whatever is in your domain. That you should do. You should not say, ki, okay, I mean, what should I do with the low birth weight? You should have started adolescent education, so that ultimately they don't land up in low birth weight. You cannot offer such arguments. You have to attack at all the levels, whatever falls in your capacity, whatever resources you have. So if you are dietitian, mind you, you have all the powers to attack it at all the levels. I mean, if you go through the current policies, I am thankful to Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, for giving it a renewed focus. So now dietitians can play enormous role at all the levels. If it is a low birth weight baby, it is not easy to handle. How to feed a low birth weight baby is a skill. So we say that ASHA workers are there at the village level, Anganwadi workers are there at the village level, but they really, I mean, you can impart them training and education in the classroom setting, but when they go to visit that family where there is low birth weight baby or premature baby, it is very difficult to pick that baby itself. It's very difficult to handle. And these low birth weight or premature might not be having a proper suckling reflex. So it might be very difficult to give them breastfeed. So if you have to spoon feed them, you have to demonstrate how to give that. If you have to demonstrate how to express the breast milk and then give it to them. So isn't it? So this management of low birth weight and premature babies in the home setting is itself a skill where all of you can play a role. So research question for you, I will raise at each step, each stage. So if you take a project or a small thesis in your area, find out how many babies were low birth weight, what were their feeding practices, and what are the gaps. And if you take up at least one low birth weight and one premature baby, do intervention over a period of time, see whether you can change the feeding practices of at least one low birth weight baby or not. Always my bottom line is, do not do only knowledge, awareness, attitude surveys. That is not required. We want people who can make change maybe for one person. So take one low birth weight baby, identify the feeding practices, find the gaps, and educate the mother, educate the family, and change the feeding practice of one low birth weight. And then you can see that if you take care of low birth weight, it should not grow into malnourished child. Now it is here the research question is that the in the first session, Dr. Anuradha demonstrated the role of the plotting, taking of weight and everything. So if you can take up few two, three low birth weight babies or one low birth weight baby and a normal birth weight baby in the same village and do the serial weights of them, plot them and see whether they are going well or not and prevent this low birth weight baby going down. They should not go below the third line or the second line. If you can keep them in the proper trajectory, as was told by Dr. Radha, and if they are going down, if you can pick that very early and then reinforce them. So take up this project and see that those those charts which Dr. Radha demonstrated looks very simple over here. But if you take one child, प्रैक्टिकली देसी भाषा में कहें तो धुएं निकल जाएंगे आपके. एक भी बच्चा आपने ऐसा पकड़ा उसको उसकी ट्रेजेक्टरी में रखना, this is not an easy task. So you will learn only if you will do it. And then all sort of adolescent education programs, adolescent feeding programs, so many things are there. In the government program, you have weekly iron folic acid supplementation. Anganwadi centers also have programs to identify malnourished adolescents and provide them with extra food and everything. So many programs are going on for adolescent health. So participate in that so that, and maybe you come out with some innovation. Say one of the problem I generally in my community programs, I say that when a woman becomes pregnant, we know that the woman is underweight, we know that woman is anemic, and then we say that you delay the first pregnancy. Okay, but it is very difficult to convince the families to delay the first pregnancy. They will try to become pregnant as early as possible. And if they become pregnant, the first trimester is very, very tricky. They develop nausea very early. And then you say that take food because you are underweight, take food because you are anemic, and at the same time she is nauseating and vomiting. So there is a huge problem. I say that when a lady gets engaged, when a girl gets engaged, उसका पता है कि अभी 1 महीने, 1.5 महीने, 2 महीने में शादी हो जाना है. जो पंजीरी आप डिलीवरी के बाद देते हो वो उसको एंगेजमेंट के बाद दे दो. Build up the nutritional status at least when the lady is engaged, because many times one of the factor why these girls do not eat, वो बोलते हैं खाएंगे तो मोटे हो जाएंगे तो शादी नहीं होगी. तो भाई अब एंगेजमेंट हो गया तो खा लो. So before they go to their in-laws house after marriage, build the nutritional status at that stage. Why not try to innovate and do some experiments at this stage? Because at the time of marriage they should be as healthy as possible, build their nutritional stores, build their energy stores, because it is very difficult to build that during pregnancy, although all our programs are targeted at that stage. Okay, so these are some of the things. Now, here I have written some of the, again, windows: antenatal care, postnatal care, under 5 child growth and development. Okay, all these are written. So again, these are windows where you can build up the nutritional deficiency. Now, antenatal care, all our indicators they measure कि आपके हमने एंटीनेटल विजिट 3-4 किया कि नहीं किया, आईएफए का 100 गोलीज दिया कि नहीं दिया, है ना. इफ यू लुक एट द रिपोर्ट, these types of indicators are available, और we laud ourselves. देखो जी हमारे तो बहुत बढ़िया चल रहा है. Our antenatal, first antenatal registration is very high. The 3-4 antenatal visits are very good. Our ladies are given 100 tablets of IFA, and we are very good. But the same ladies with all these high visits, IFA tablets, etc., when they come near delivery, they are anemic. And why? Why they are anemic at the time of delivery? Because we kept on measuring some of the processes. We never thought whether all our registration and visits they were effective or not. आपने गोली IFA का पकड़ा दिया, उसने खाया कि नहीं खाया? We don't know, and we are not focusing on the compliance part. And so many interventions. I mean, in our department, we are in touch with the nursing department, National Institute of Nursing over here. Many nursing students have done thesis with me in 90s. We tried to do some interventions how to improve the compliance. I mean, our observation that was that people they drop out of consuming IFA in first 2 weeks. तो आज आपने IFA दिया, वो 2-4 दिन खाएंगी, फिर कहेंगी जलन हो रही है, गर्मी हो गई, लैट्रिन काली हो गई, मुझे तो सूट नहीं कर रही है, and then they will say, okay, I will not take this tablet. They will drop out. So if you, at the beginning, when you prescribe the tablet, if you tell the lady that these are the benefits, कि अगर आप खाओगे तो ये सब कुछ होगा, लेकिन ये 2-3 हफ्ते में ठीक हो जाएगा, लेकिन नहीं खाओगे तो आपका बच्चा कमजोर हो जाएगा. बच्चे का जो कमजोर बच्चा होगा तो उसकी डेथ भी हो सकती है, और आपका बच्चा आपके पड़ोसी के बच्चे से पीछे रह जाएगा. इफ यू टेल कि ये बेनिफिट्स हैं इस IFA टेबलेट के, तो आप अपने होने वाले बच्चे के लिए थोड़ी सी ये जलन बर्दाश्त नहीं कर सकते. I have tried myself. When you give these messages in the proper perspective, जैसे हमें तो किसी ने बताया ही नहीं सर, ऐसा भी होता है कि इसके इतने फायदे हैं. So if our women are anemic at the time of pregnancy, you detect that this is the last window where you should, if you have picked up anemia, do all out efforts to treat that with full passion, with full counseling, and do the follow up after 1 week. कि कोई problem है तो हमें बताओ. And another gap over here is in the health system, कि when there are not enough tools to detect anemia. अभी तक या तो वो देख के ही बताती हैं, साली 1 मीटर होता है, वो उनके कबर्ड से पड़ा रहता है, वो यूज करती नहीं है, करेंगी भी तो उससे कुछ होता नहीं है. So now Government of India is asking to use the digital hemoglobin meters like True HB meter, जो जैसे prick किया और साथ के साथ reading देगा. Now take some research projects and use those point of care hemoglobin instruments, and then go to the community, see whether you can detect anemia, try to do some interventions to improve and treat those ladies. Do follow up on telephone. किसी ने पिछले सेशन में पूछा था COVID-19 के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या कर सकते हैं. कोविड-19 के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आप डिटेक्शन नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन काउंसलिंग तो बहुत बढ़िया कर सकते हैं। ये सारे जो प्रोग्राम्स अभी ऑनलाइन चल रहे हैं, यू कैन कनेक्ट विद द एंटीनेटल वुमेन एंड टेल देम कि आपको 2 गोली खाना है या आपको इंजेक्टेबल लगवाना है, डिपेंडिंग ऑन द लेवल ऑफ एनीमिया. So if you take care of these mothers during pregnancy, build their anemia, it will have impact on the birth weight of the baby, and that birth weight will impact the subsequent prevalence of SAM babies, isn't it? So this is an important window of antenatal care. But then question is that in what settings you can improve the antenatal care? In all the settings, whether at home level, at community level, at health facility level, and by all these people, Ashas, Anganwadi workers, ANMs and doctors, all they can contribute for antenatal care. होम सेटिंग्स में अगर आपकी आशा वर्कर जा रही है, आपकी आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर जा रही है एंटीनेटल केयर के लिए, पीपल से इनको ट्रेनिंग दे दो. अब ये ट्रेनिंग दो, जरूर दो, लेकिन अब ये 8वीं 10वीं पास जो हैं आशा वर्कर्स, ऑल दी प्रोग्राम्स हैव बीन थ्रस्ट अपॉन देम, और हम सोचते हैं कि ये सब कुछ यही करेगी. अगर वो ब्लाइंडनेस प्रोग्राम है तो वो ब्लाइंडनेस देखेगी, लेप्रोसी प्रोग्राम है तो लेप्रोसिस देखेगी, ट्यूबरक्लोसिस प्रोग्राम है तो ट्यूबरक्लोसिस देखेगी. सारे प्रोग्राम वो आशा वर्कर देखेगी जो 8वीं 10वीं पास है. उसका तरीका ये है कि वो अकेली कुछ नहीं कर सकती जब तक उसके पास when the support of the supervisors at the ANM and doctor level is not there, and then use technology. अगर आप कहते हो कि एक एंटीनेटल मदर को बताना है कि क्या खुराक लेनी है, क्या नहीं लेनी, गोली कैसे लेनी है, गोली कैसे नहीं लेनी, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग कैसे करना है, क्या टेक्निक्स हैं, उसको छोटी छोटी वीडियोस बना के उसको एक स्मार्टफोन आजकल मिलने लग गया है या वो पैड्स भी मिलने लग गए हैं, आप वो सारी वीडियोस उसको लोड कर दो. जैसे ही मदर को बोलना है, उसे खुद ना बोलना पड़े, वो वीडियो रन कर देगी, देखो ये हमारे डॉक्टर साहब ने बताया ये करना है. Now that standard message using standard mode will go to the relevant target audience. और फिर भी अगर कोई क्वेरी है तो use teleconsultation. Now that ASHA worker in that family can get that particular person connected to a doctor or ANM. उसकी specific query है वो आंसर करवा दो. कहने का मतलब ये है कि these are the windows in the national programs. Similarly postnatal care. अब डिलीवरी के लिए जब आ गए तो अब ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग करवाना है. नाउ हियर what we have observed is that there is lot of awareness among mothers कि एक्सक्लूसिव ब्रेस्ट फीड करवाना है जी, ब्रेस्ट फीड से पहले प्रीलैक्टियल फीड नहीं देना, कुछ नहीं देना. दैट अवेयरनेस इज देयर. आई हैव माई सेल्फ ऑब्जर्व्ड इन द हॉस्पिटल कि गए वहां, डिलीवरी हो गई थी 6-7 घंटे पहले, 8 घंटे पहले, पूछा उसको क्या दिया, कहते जी कुछ नहीं दिया. मदर बोलती है कुछ नहीं दिया. क्यों कुछ नहीं दिया? वो बोलते हैं कि जी वो कि अपना दूध ही देना है, उससे पहले तो कुछ देना नहीं है. तो दूध क्यों नहीं दिया? बोलते जी कोई आके बताएगा तो हम दूध देंगे. नाउ दीज पीपल who have this awareness that only breastfeed has to be given, but they also think that when they are in the hospital, nurse will come and tell कि अब दूध दे दो. That instruction is not coming. So what it means that you have to be responsive in your hospitals wherever deliveries are taking place. People should be responsible, accountability should be fixed कि डिलीवरी हुआ है. तो आजकल तो ये कंसेप्ट है कि डिलीवरी टेबल के ऊपर ही, इससे पहले कि आप ओलनाल काटें, वो बोलते हैं कि बेबी को माँ के पेट पे रख दो, बेबी नेचुरली क्रॉल करेगा टुवर्ड्स द ब्रेस्ट, a natural crawling movement toward the breast, and will start suckling. So that type of concept is being promoted. So in no case ऐसा कभी ना हो कि डिलीवरी हो गया है, हॉस्पिटल में डिलीवरी हुआ है और घंटों तक बेबी को कुछ नहीं दिया. Because of these reasons, baby will go into hypoglycemia, hypothermia, and there would be different problems. So in the institute itself, when you are in the postnatal care window, breastfeeding promotion is very, very important, and you can do many innovations. आप और आपका जो रोल है एज न्यूट्रिशन काउंसलर हर जगह के ऊपर, आई विल शो इन दी subsequent slides also. As nutrition counselor आपका रोल हर जगह है, चाहे आप होम सेटिंग के लिए लोगों को ट्रेन करना है, कम्युनिटी सेटिंग में, हेल्थ फैसिलिटी में, ओपीडी में, इन पेशेंट्स में, हर जगह आपका रोल है. एंड देन सिमिलरली ये पोर्शन जो है अंडर 5 चाइल्ड ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट का, दिस वाज tackled in detailed by Dr. Anuradha, that in all Anganwadi centers, I mean this is very important window कि जहाँ ये बेबीज का ग्रोथ मॉनिटरिंग होना चाहिए. लेकिन यहाँ अगर होता है और काफी जगह होता है, सिर्फ वेट मॉनिटरिंग होता है. अभी आप देखो कि सैम डिटेक्ट करना है आपको, तो क्या खाली वेट से डिटेक्ट हो जाएगा? वेट तो आपको वेट फॉर एज देगा, अंडर वेट देगा. इट विल नॉट गो वेस्टिंग, इट विल नॉट गिव वेस्टिंग विच इज वेट फॉर हाइट. और हाइट या लेंथ जो है जनरली नहीं ली जाती. तो अगर जनरली नहीं ली जाती तो फिर वेस्टिंग कैसे डिटेक्ट करेगा आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर भी, जहां सबसे ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट एक्टिविटीज न्यूट्रिशन की अगर होती है तो यहाँ होती है. कम्युनिटी सेटिंग में विलेज हेल्थ एंड न्यूट्रिशन डेज सेलिब्रेट होते हैं, जहां हर महीने सेशंस लगते हैं. बहुत सी स्टेट्स में कुछ दूसरे प्रोग्राम होते हैं कि गोद भराई रस्म है, अन्नपूर्णा दिवस है. जैसे इवन जो 6 महीने के ऊपर अगर कम्प्लीमेंट्री न्यूट्रिशन शुरू करना है तो बहुत से स्टेट उसको सेलिब्रेट करते हैं कि आज जो है बच्चे को ऊपर से ऊपरी आहार खिलाया जाएगा. दैट इज टेकन एज ए फेस्टिवल. That festival is celebrated and in the presence of everyone that food is given. Okay, so now all these are windows in the national programs. If you take actions at any stage and at every stage, it is likely to have bearing on the prevalence of SAM, and all these actions can be taken at all the levels: home, community, and health facility, and by all these people. Okay, whether this is home-based newborn care, breastfeeding, complementary feeding, appropriate feeding, adolescent nutrition, and Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram, and even programs for adolescents. Okay, so this is in nutshell all the national programs which are available to treat SAM and so that to prevent the SAM. In next few slides, I will give you some details. Some of that has already been discussed. And in the end, I have one case study. Although number of slides for case studies are many more, you can read, but I will quickly give you some of the gist of the case study. So you have to be very carefully, you should listen that very carefully, because I mean, why SAM is happening? This is not a medical disorder. This is a social disorder also, and you should catch those things because of which SAM is happening. Okay. Now, breastfeeding we have discussed, but these are the challenges. All these challenges are project for you that no one takes responsibility. We have discussed in detail. But if there is cesarean section, how to feed? I mean, now there are guidelines and videos that when the cesarean section is happening, again on the operation table itself, people have experimented to feed the baby. Okay. But if there is cesarean section, again hospital has to be responsible for that. Now, these are two very, very important problems. Milk not coming, milk not sufficient for the baby. These are two very important problems जिसकी वजह से लोग फीड नहीं करते. कि दूध तो उतरता नहीं जी, हम क्या करें? ठीक है, दूध नहीं उतर रहा तो बोतल लगा देंगे. वंस एक बार बोतल लगा दिया तो नाउ आई कैन नॉट गो इनटू डिटेल्स, लेकिन बोतल लगाने से वो दूध अपने आप जब आ रहा है तो इट इज वेरी इजी फॉर द बेबी टू कंज्यूम. बेबी हैज टू डू सम एफर्ट्स टू सकल एट द ब्रेस्ट. So all those problems कि अगर दूध नहीं आ रहा और लोग बोलते हैं कि sufficient नहीं है, you discuss in detail with your teachers that how to tackle with this. And many times these problems are कि mothers को trained ही नहीं किया गया है कि बच्चे को कैसे पकड़ना है, बच्चे को कैसे अटैच करना है जिससे कि बच्चा इफेक्टिवली सकल कर पाए. And all these are again I am saying projects. My students have done such small things that how to improve the breastfeeding practice. You take few lactating women, you observe how they are feeding, you one-to-one counseling, you tell them how to hold the baby, how what is a good suckling, demonstrate them, do the follow-up, and see whether that improves or not. You do the group counseling, you do the audio visual aids. There are films available on how to effectively breastfeed feed the baby. And there are now special problems कि अगर वाकई ही मदर को किसी कारण से दूध नहीं आ रहा या if there was maternal death or something, then role of wet nurses and now expressed breast milk is coming up in very important way. और बहुत सी स्टेट में तो स्पेशल प्रोग्राम चल रहा है हर डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल के ऊपर. ये प्रोविजन है कि अगर बच्चा नर्सरी में है, बच्चा बीमार है, मदर वहां है एडमिटेड, तो उसका मिल्क एक्सप्रेस करके उसकी डब्बियों में लेबल करके फ्रिज में रखते हैं. एंड द नर्सरी पीपल दे टेक दोस लेबल्ड sort of express breast milk and give it to the babies who are admitted in the hospital. But similarly, the same concept is if mothers are working, घर में अगर वो जा रही हैं बेबी को छोड़कर, then they can leave their express milk, breast milk at home. But at the workplace also, now there are provisions कि वहां आप अपना दूध निकाल के फ्रिज में रख देते हो और वहां बीच में आपको ब्रेक मिलता है और अपना दूध नहीं पिला सकते या क्रच में जो भी हैंडल कर रहा है तो आपका दूध जो है वो बच्चे को पिला दिया जाएगा. So all these interventions you can try. Now the challenge for exclusive breastfeed for first 6 months. आपको वो ट्राइबल एरिया का भी बताया कि हाँ वो शुरू तो बड़ी जल्दी कर लेते हैं लेकिन एक्सक्लूसिव ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग नहीं करते 6 महीने के लिए. ठीक है, तो वो 6 महीने के लिए जो नहीं करते वो उसके अंदर इम्पोर्टेंट है कि एक तो बॉटल लगा देते हैं. उनको लगता है कि बेबी को दूध सफिशिएंट नहीं आ रहा, पेट नहीं भर रहा, तो बॉटल लगा देते हैं. एंड अनदर इम्पोर्टेंट प्रॉब्लम इज जो हमारे खुद के ही हेल्थ स्टाफ के लोग दुश्मन हैं, वो हॉस्पिटल में ही कोई ना कोई क्लास 4 या नर्स कोई ना कोई बोलेगी कि जी आप उसको तो बाजार से दूध का पाउडर लाके पिलाना शुरू कर दो, माँ का दूध तो कितना पिलाएंगे, है ना. तो infant milk substitute is banned. You should know by law. It cannot be given. One can be penalized for that. Penalty लगेगी, imprisonment होगी. Only under specific medical conditions this can be given. Okay. Now this is again yet a very important part, complementary feeding, जो पिछले सेशन में भी हाईलाइट किया. अभी जो आपको बताया कि 4 और मोर फूड ग्रुप्स नहीं दिए जाते और फ्रीक्वेंसी वगैरह भी बताई. बट द प्रॉब्लम अबाउट कम्प्लीमेंट्री फीड इज कि हम कहते हैं 6 महीने तक माँ का दूध दो. अब जैसे ही 6 महीने पूरे हुए अगला दिन हुआ, जो मदर अवेयर है कि ये सब देना है वो कहेगी ओके नाउ अब इसको मैं दाल भी दूंगी, इसको मैं चावल भी दूंगी, इसको अंडा भी दूंगी, सब कुछ मैं दूंगी क्योंकि गाइडलाइन में लिखा हुआ है 6 महीने के बाद कम्प्लीमेंट्री फूड दो. अब वो बच्चा अभी एक ही दिन तो क्रॉस किया है ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग स्टेज से. इफ यू स्टार्ट गिविंग ऑल दैट, चाइल्ड मे नॉट एक्सेप्ट दैट. और यही एक बहुत बड़ा गैप है, हाउ टू इंट्रोड्यूस दैट कम्प्लीमेंट्री फीड. बच्चे को तो सिर्फ अभी माँ के दूध का ही स्वाद है. अभी कोई भी फूड आप दोगे तो धीरे धीरे इनिशिएट करोगे इन सेमी सॉलिड फॉर्म, उसको मैश करके अच्छे से, मिक्सी में नहीं घुमाना, लेकिन इतना भी पतला ना हो कि वो चम्मच से गिर जाए, थिक हो, इतना भी थिक ना हो कि अंदर जम जाए. और अगर आप एक फूड जो है उसको देते हो, वो उसको जैसे जीभ पे रखोगे द चाइल्ड विल स्पिट, थूकेगा. अब मदर क्या सोचती है कि मैंने तो जी इसको देने की कोशिश की, बच्चा थूक देता है, बच्चे को तो पसंद नहीं आया ये फूड, इसलिए मैंने देना बंद कर दिया. भाई ये सोचो कि वो उसके लिए नया फूड है, उसके अभी टेस्ट बर्ड्स को पता ही नहीं टेस्ट क्या है. तो अगर वो फूड बार बार रखोगे 2, 4, 5 दिन तक, हफ्ते तक रखोगे, then the child will start accepting that food. Once there is acceptance to that food, then you introduce a different food. Okay, and then you do this, and if you start giving these types of food, different foods in different weeks, then child will start accepting. But important है 8-9 महीने से पहले पहले तक जो सब्जी, हरी ग्रीन लीफी वेजिटेबल जो कुछ खिलाना चाहते हो खिला दो। अगर वो नहीं खिलाओगे 8-9 महीने से पहले, फिर वही होगा जो अभी आपको डॉक्टर स्पर्णा घोष बोल रही थी कि बेबी को तो पैक्ड जो है फैंसी चीजें पसंद है ना, बेबी को बेस पसंद है, तो वो चीज जो है वो मांगने लगेगा क्योंकि उसका टेस्ट तो आपने डेवलप ही नहीं करवाया। तो दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि जब आप कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री फूड इंट्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, बच्चा थूकेगा, दैट इज ए नॉर्मल प्रोसेस। डू नॉट टेक इट लाइक दिस कि जी अब तो ये उसको पसंद नहीं कर रहा। ओके, सो आई विल, सो ये हमने डिस्कस कर लिया। ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग एट द इंस्टीट्यूशन लेवल, बच्चा कहीं भी हो, ओपीडी में आए, इंडोर में आए, कहीं भी आए, डू नॉट miss that opportunity to assess the nutritional status and then appropriate sort of feeding and counseling, चाहे individual counseling करो या group counseling करो, ठीक है, home में करो, community में करो, you can go through this reading that what are the guidelines and what you can do, and then accordingly you can sort of plan your interventions and do something. Now this case study in next 5 minutes or so. Now this was done by my MD student, now who is senior resident now. अब एक बच्चा था, उसको मैनेज करने में हमारे धुएं निकल गए, ठीक है। That is why I'm saying it is very easy to teach, but it is very difficult to do it. अब ये बच्चा जो है, I will not read each and every line, but basically क्या था कि मदर ये कंप्लेंट कर रही है कि बच्चे का वजन नहीं बढ़ रहा, 3 महीने से नहीं बढ़ रहा। और ये उसको कैसे पता लगा? क्योंकि बच्चा बीच बीच में आंगनवाड़ी में जाता था, आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर ने बताया कि जी ये इसका तो वजन नहीं बढ़ रहा है ना। एज आई टोल्ड यू कि आंगनवाड़ी के अंदर वेट करते हैं, वहाँ वेट फॉर हाइट नहीं करते। तो कम से कम उसने वेट देख के कि भाई आपने 3-4 बार करवाया, बच्चे का वेट नहीं बढ़ रहा, तो उसने मदर को बोला कि वजन नहीं बढ़ रहा, ठीक है। और नाउ पे अटेंशन टू दिस लाइन। मदर कहती है कि ठीक है नहीं बढ़ रहा, पर मैंने सोचा कि वेट ही तो है, बढ़ जाएगा, क्या कौन सी बड़ी बात है, बढ़ जाएगा, बच्चा है, वेट बढ़ जाएगा। लेकिन आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर ने फिर भी कहा ना, दिस यू कैन से दैट दिस वाज ए गुड आंगनवाड़ी वर्कर हु एम्फसाइज कि नहीं नहीं ये रेड फ्लैग है जी, आप जाओ डॉक्टर के पास। तो अब वो रेड फ्लैग रेज किया कि आप जाओ डॉक्टर के पास, एंड रेड फ्लैग वाज रेज्ड बेस्ड अपॉन ओनली वेट, नॉट सैम कि वेट नहीं बढ़ रहा। अब वो गए प्राइमरी हेल्थ सेंटर, मैंने बोला मेडिकल ऑफिसर होगा, वहां प्राइमरी हेल्थ सेंटर में डॉक्टर के पास गए। डॉक्टर ने देखा, उसने भी सैम ने डिटेक्ट किया, उसने भी वेट फॉर हाइट नहीं देखा। हाँ, उसने कहा वजन कम है, इसको आप जो है ना ज्यादा खाना दो और थोड़ी सी उसने दवाइयां दे दी, ठीक है, ज्यादा खाना दो और थोड़ी सी दवाइयां दे दी, डबल करो, उसने कहा खाना डबल कर दो। कोई स्पेसिफिक न्यूट्रिशन काउंसलिंग नहीं की, ठीक है, थोड़ी दवाई दे दी और बोला खाना डबल कर दो। अब वो कहते हैं कि बच्चे को मैं खाना दे रही हूँ, बच्चा तो ले नहीं रहा एक्स्ट्रा फूड, ठीक है, तो मैंने वो जब ले नहीं रहा तो मैंने ज्यादा जोर नहीं दिया, लेकिन वजन नहीं बढ़ा। पर साथ में वो बोलती है कि बच्चा सारा दिन खाता रहता है, सारा दिन खाता रहता है, बट वजन नहीं बढ़ रहा। पहले भी 1 साल पहले ऐसे हुआ था। जब 1 साल पहले हुआ था, then at that point of time we have a health post in that village where our doctor is going, where our ANM is there, who are supposed to do but better than what others in the routine health systems are doing. So over there again, our ANM also told that this child is not gaining weight, and here our doctor did weight and height and diagnosed the baby for the first time as Sam. Okay, and they found that baby had worms. They did the deworming. They also suggested some home-based recipes. So now the management was little better than what was there at PHC Angola. And then they again 1 महीने तक देखा उन्होंने, ज्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ा, because we are going only once in a week. So our team also referred now to a higher level of community health center. Okay, 1 महीना देखने के बाद, now this is a higher level of community health center. Red flag था, but उसने क्या किया, दवाइयां लिख दी, और बोला कि खाना ज्यादा खाओ। अभी कुछ दवाइयां, सब मेडिसिन वर गिवन फ्रॉम द हेल्थ सेंटर, बट दे रोट सम मेडिसिन की कुछ बजाई दवाई बाजार से ले लेना, एंड देन सम मेडिसिन दे वर गिवन। अब जैसे ही बाजार से दवाई लिखी, द फैमिली शट डाउन कि ये तो अब दवाई कहाँ से खरीदेंगे, गरीब लोग हैं। तब उनके दिमाग में किसी ने ये डाला, ये तो काला जादू है, दिस इज ब्लैक मैजिक। वो सियाने के पास जाओ, सियाने ने धागा बांध दिया और कुछ जो है पाउडर सा दे दिया, विच वी प्रिज्यूम वर स्टीरॉइड। अब वो स्टीरॉइड जैसा कोई पाउडर था, धागा बांध दिया, 2-3 हफ्ते में उनको लगा द बेबी इज इंप्रूविंग, बट देन अगेन बेबी केम टू द सेम थिंग। मदर नेवर टुक दी this thing very seriously कि बच्चा वेट गेन वेट नहीं कर रहा। she was attributing it to the black magic. It was brought to the notice of the RBSK team also, but the family was in this thing. अब थोड़ा सा इसका हेल्थ केयर सीकिंग बिहेवियर देखो फैमिली का। व्हेन यू लिसन टू दिस स्टोरी, आपको ये लगता है कि ये फैमिली तो जो है अनपढ़ है, गरीब लोग हैं, इनको कुछ नहीं पता, इनका तो हेल्थ सीकिंग बिहेवियर ऐसा ही है। इट इज नॉट ट्रू। व्हेन इट वाज द केस ऑफ हर ओन प्रेगनेंसी, उसने बहुत जल्दी रजिस्टर करवा लिया था, है ना। प्रेगनेंसी रजिस्ट्रेशन था, एंटीनेटल विजिट हुआ, फॉलिक एसिड उसको मिला, आयरन फॉलिक एसिड, वेट गेन उसका सफिशिएंट नहीं था, टेटनस टॉक्सिक, हीमोग्लोबिन कम था, तो प्राइवेट में जाके इंजेक्टेबल आयरन भी लगवाया ही, ठीक है। और फुल टर्म नॉर्मल डिलीवरी थी और हॉस्पिटल में डिलीवरी करवाई और वहां 3 दिन तक भी रही। सो इफ यू लुक एट दिस बिहेवियर, दिस इज ए फैंटास्टिक बिहेवियर। बट डिस्पाइट ऑल दैट, वजन बच्चे का कम था, लो बर्थ वेट, ओके, बट ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग 1 घंटे में शुरू कर दिया, कोई टॉप फीड नहीं थी, बच्चा आज तक फुल्ली इम्यूनाइज है, ओके। 6 महीने तक एक्सक्लूसिव ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग किया, उसको पता था कि 6 महीने के बाद कम्प्लीमेंट्री फीड देना है। लेकिन नाउ कम्प्लीमेंट्री फीड, द क्वालिटी ऑफ कम्प्लीमेंट्री फीड वाज दैट काउज मिल्क, ब्रेस्ट फीडिंग तो दिया, बट दाल का पानी, राइस एंड अदर डिशेज वर गिवन आफ्टर 1 ईयर। और जैसे ही उसने खाना देना शुरू किया, चाइल्ड रिजेक्टेड द फूड बाय स्पिटिंग, एंड देन द मदर डिड नॉट मेक एनी एफर्ट। उसको लगा ये तो पसंद नहीं है, ये खाना नहीं खाता, थोड़ा बहुत दे दिया, कुछ खा लिया तो नहीं खा लिया। Although in later they started complementary feed at 6 months, but the quantity of the complementary feed was not good, and the attitude of the mother that the baby is rejecting the food, and that is why they did not do any effort. That type of thing was there, and it is because of that child started deteriorating. And आंगनवाड़ी में जा रहे हैं, देखो अगेन ए गुड बिहेवियर, आंगनवाड़ी में रजिस्टर है, आंगनवाड़ी में गए, आंगनवाड़ी में दे गिव कैरी होम फूड। अब उसकी दादी जो है वो खाना लेने जाती है, आंगनवाड़ी से बच्चे का नाम का खाना ले लिया, लेकिन रास्ते में खुद खा गई। वो बच्चे को तो पसंद ही नहीं है जी, उसको क्या दे, वो तो थूक देता है, उसको थोड़ा बहुत दे देते हैं, बाकी दादी खुद खा जाती है। नाउ इस तरह से अगर वो चल रहा है, एंड देन बेबी वॉज रिजेक्टिंग दी आंगनवाड़ी बाय, कहती जी आंगनवाड़ी में पंखा नहीं है, वहां गर्मी लगती है, मैं तो वहां बैठ नहीं सकता, ओके। तो दिस टाइप ऑफ कॉन्टेक्ट वाज गोइंग ऑन। और घर में जो खाना मिल रहा था वो आधी कटोरी लिक्विड फूड या 2-2.5 कटोरी फूड दे रहे हैं, इनएडिक्वेट सर्विंग, और कोई हाथ नहीं धो रहा, है ना। इस तरह की प्रैक्टिसेस जो हैं वो चल रही हैं, एंड इट वाज नॉट, एंड अल्टीमेटली ये आपका कोर डोमेन है कि कितना कैलोरी डेफिसिट था, प्रोटीन डेफिसिट था, and this type of house environment and sanitation environment was there, and they are very well aware of the girl education benefits of using all these services. So they were caught in this black magic, और मतलब जो उसका बच्चे की अपनी जो वेट गेन के बारे में उनकी जो थॉट थी was not good. So what you observe, that pathway of developing the malnutrition in this baby was anemia in pregnancy, low birth weight, delayed supplementary feeding, inadequate feeding, and lack of hand washing. So then what we did, because now there was no complication, we checked for that. So then we had to give the catch-up feeds, the F100 वगैरह बोलते हैं. These are the type of frequencies and feed given. And this is here. We requested our dietetics department to help us, but they were very busy. So then we looked at the literature. So this type of catch-up diet was given, and but in addition to diet alone will not help. You have to give love and care. You have to play with the baby. You have to do the follow-up, and you have to raise the knowledge of the family about the food which you can cook for them. We searched the literature. There was recipes book available from the Health and Family Welfare website. Then we assess what type of ingredients this family is purchasing in routine. What are the likes and dislikes of the baby? Accordingly, we then help the family to prepare this type of khichdi, this type of halwa. This was administered. We sensitize the local Anganwadi workers, ANMs, ASHAs, and even Panch of the village to sort of do the follow-up to this family, to encourage them, and then ultimately help them in taking this type of diet. And then what we found that before our intervention, this dotted line, before this intervention, for so many weeks, this was the average weekly weight gain trend. We took this from the Anganwadi record or the records available with our ANM, and then we saw that this was the weight plotted, and then we converted that into weekly weight gain. And this is the trend that for last so many weeks, the weight was going down. And this is here we did the intervention. This is interrupted time series analysis. It tells that if we do not intervene, then this will go like this, down and down. But once we intervened over here, immediately there was increase in the weight of the baby, and it started increasing. There was a dip over here because it is here the child again got some infection. There was dip, but then the catch up in the weight was there, and the trend shows that this weight started increasing. So the last message is that listen to the needs of children, motivate the person involved for BCC, and the pathway for success of management lies in persistent practice of public health approach. वो एक लेक्चर देकर एक बार बीसीसी करके उससे सेम ठीक नहीं होने वाला. You have to engage with the family to understand what is going wrong and change their practice through engagement. And I strongly appeal that you should engage with at least one family of them during your courses and see how easy or difficult it is to manage the SAM, and try to involve in all the programs through which you can lead to reduction in some of the intermediate outcomes that ultimately lead to SAM. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for making us aware about the management and nutritional policies in India to combat malnutrition. And you have given us the ideas about the future researches, and also you have realized us the role of nutritionists, how important the dietitian and nutritionist, and how they can play an important role to manage malnutrition among the communities. Thank you so much, sir. Ilaf, now you can ask a few questions. Ilaf?
I hope I was audible throughout.
Yeah, sir, you are audible. Ilaf, you can take few questions. Hello, Ilaf? Ilaf? Anil sir, can you please unmute Ilaf? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Start, Ilaf.
Yeah. Sir, so the first question is, the participant wants to ask, due to the lockdown, as all the balwadis are closed and the nutritional supplements are also not being given to the children, so how can we combat the nutrition loss then?
So this question partly I have answered. difficult to identify it in the weight measurement. However, nowadays that all ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, they have telephone numbers of all the families who are enrolled with them. So try to have digital intervention, and this is again one of the projects people can do. Like I am now, one of my students had done in MPH that on telephone consultation, she counseled the about IFA and all that. And currently in COVID, my health team is now not going to the clinic physically. We are experimenting that one worker is going and is arranging the teleconsultation, and my team is doing all the teleconsultation from here. So this is an experiment, golden opportunity available to all the budding researchers, that can you take this, for one of your person take this as an assignment, try to link up with one of the Anganwadi workers and ask that Anganwadi worker कि आपके पास रजिस्टर में जितने भी लोग रजिस्टर्ड हैं, आजकल हर किसी का फोन नंबर है, ओके, वो फोन नंबर आप लेते हो एंड ट्राई टू सॉर्ट ऑफ डेवलप योर पैकेज, कि आप उनको फोन करके पूछते हो कि अभी बच्चा क्या खा रहा है, कैसे खा रहा है ना, और ट्राई टू tell them what should be taken, try to develop small videos which you can deliver to each and everyone. So try to do those tele interventions. Okay, so those interventions are possible. Measurements are difficult. Measurement भी कर सकते हो, लेकिन उसके लिए आपको हर घर में एक वेइंग स्केल अवेलेबल करवाना पड़ेगा, या कुछ ऐसा करना पड़ेगा कि देखो फलानी जगह पर वेइंग स्केल है, आप बारी बारी से जाओ, जाके वेट करवा लो, इंस्टेड ऑफ मेकिंग ए क्लस्टर, ए ग्रुप नहीं बनाना, लेकिन इंडिविजुअली जाके तो कर ही सकते हैं ना. तो ट्राई दिस इंटरवेंशन, दिस इज द गोल्डन टाइम टू ट्राई दिस टेली इंटरवेंशन.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Any other question?
No, sir. Thank you so much.
थक गए लोग ना, थर्ड सेशन है, टायर्ड.
Yeah, sir. I got one question. There was one question. Yeah. So most of the participants are majoring in the field of nutrition over here. So, would you like to suggest some research topics for the future studies that we can?
मैंने तो मेरी प्रेजेंटेशन में तो रिसर्च टॉपिक ही हैं. आप जो है, पहला जो है आपका, your student should identify that in which life cycle phase they want to do. They want to work in for antenatal period, postnatal period, infancy, childhood, adolescent. उनको किस एज ग्रुप में काम करना अच्छा लगता है, ठीक है, पहला तो ये सिलेक्ट करें. फिर जिस भी फील्ड में काम करना अच्छा लगता है, I have told you the nutritional interventions in that phase. Okay, then उस फेज के कुछ लोगों को वो एनरोल करके देखें that what is their existing practice and understanding, and then devise some intervention, okay, and then try that intervention whether it works or not. तो पहले एक या दो के अंदर अपना इंटरवेंशन पैकेज जो है वो टेस्ट करें, and then that can be, when you take it on a project base, then one can have larger sample, and then you say कि अगर आप इस इंटरवेंशन को इस तरीके से देते हैं तो ये इम्पैक्ट आएगा, और अगर आप स्टैंडर्ड तरीके से देते हैं तो ये इम्पैक्ट आएगा, ठीक है. तो इन टू सिनेरियोस, है ना, लाइक अभी जैसे, इसीलिए मेरा क्वेश्चन था डॉक्टर सपन्ना से कि इंडिजिनस फूड दिया, वहाँ दो ग्रुप बन गए, और इवन जब डाइटरी डाइवर्सिफिकेशन स्कोर देखा तो एक ग्रुप था जिसका स्कोर अच्छा था, दूसरा ग्रुप था जिसका स्कोर अच्छा नहीं था. When you have these two natural groups, then I would be interested to know कि न्यूट्रिशनल आउटकम क्या रहा. अगर न्यूट्रिशनल आउटकम में कोई इम्पैक्ट आया, फिर तो ये सारी इंटरवेंशन का हम कहेंगे कि भी न्यूट्रिशनल स्टेटस इंप्रूव होगा. ठीक, नहीं तो हम ये कहेंगे कि दिस इटसेल्फ इज ए गुड कंसेप्ट, वी शुड हैव लोकल इंडिजिनस फूड. एंड अगेन एक जो रिसर्च टॉपिक के हिसाब से और ये इस ग्रुप के लिए एक इम्पोर्टेंट मैसेज मैं ये देना चाहूंगा, जो बहुत गलती होती है कि जितने भी न्यूट्रिशनिस्ट हैं वो जनरली जो आपकी किताबों में वो लिखे होते हैं ना रेसिपी, एक सर्विंग इसकी, एक सर्विंग इसकी, या ये रिप्लेसमेंट है, वो सारी अंग्रेजी सर्विंग होती हैं। उसके अंदर लोकल फूड जो है, इट इज नॉट कि वो ट्राइबल एरिया है तो वहाँ का इंडिजिनस फूड होगा, लेकिन वो इंसान की रूटीन डाइट के अंदर क्या चीजें हैं उसमें से सर्विंग बतानी चाहिए। वो आपकी स्टैंडर्ड किताबों में जो सर्विंग लिखी हैं वही उसको एक डाइट चार्ट पकड़ा देते हैं, या ये ले लो या ये ले लो, उसमें से आधी चीजें तो उसको समझ ही नहीं लगती ये है क्या चीज, अंग्रेजी में लिखी हुई है। ठीक है, तो इसलिए जैसे मैंने बताया कि सैम बेबी के लिए, मतलब वन ऑफ, अगर आपको सिर्फ सैम के लिए काम करना है, वन ऑफ द इम्पोर्टेंट सक्सेस टॉपिक इज दैट व्हाट टाइप ऑफ लोकल फूड यू कैन प्रिपेयर टू मैनेज द सैम बेबी। मैंने अपनी अब न्यूट्रिशन टीम को बोला है कि नो, दिस इज अगेन ए रिसर्च टॉपिक। आपको डॉक्टर सुपर्णा ने बोला कि बच्चे को पैकेज कलरफुल फूड अच्छा लगता है, हम भी देखते हैं कि ये खाली गरीबी के कारण सैम नहीं हो रहे, वो उसका इसी केस में उसका फादर उसको 10 रुपए देता है, जाके कुरकुरे खा ले, कुरकुरे का पैकेट लेके खा लेगा वो, ठीक है, लेकिन वो न्यूट्रिशनल रेसिपी नहीं देगा। तो आई हैव आस्क्ड माय असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर न्यूट्रिशन टू कैन वी प्रिपेयर सम हेल्दी कुरकुरे एंड पैक दैट इन दी फैंसी पैकेट। कुरकुरे खाने हैं तो हम हेल्दी कुरकुरे खिला देते हैं, ठीक है, मीठे नमकीन सब खिला देते हैं। तो दिस इज द टाइम फॉर यू टू डेवलप इंडिजिनसली समथिंग व्हिच इज एक्सेप्टेबल टू द पॉपुलेशन एंड पैक इन ए वे। ये तो आजकल इतने सीरियल्स में दिखाते हैं कि बच्चे को पिज्जा खाना है तो मदर जो है हेल्दी पिज्जा बना देती हैं, ठीक है। So now this is the role of nutritionist, that how you can actually prepare some good healthy recipes which is acceptable to this audience of children. Okay, ये नहीं है कि हमने पढ़ लिया कि ये पत्ते खाओ, साग खाओ तो यही खाओ, वो कितने पत्ते खिलाओगे, साग खिलाओगे, ऐसे नहीं जाएगा। आप ये देखते हो कि एक अंग्रेजी सीरियल है पोपाय, ऐसे करके है ना, कुछ ऐसा है ना, एक पोपाय करके, उसके अंदर कार्टून नेटवर्क है, एंड देन उसमें क्या है, वो जब भी उसको लड़ना है वो डब्बा तोड़ता है, उसमें से पालक खाता है, उसमें ताकत आ जाती है, उसके बाद वो लड़ने लग जाता है। तो हैव दिस टाइप ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन कि भाई हरा खाने से ताकत आती है, और उसके बाद देखो वो बच्चा लड़ाइयाँ कर रहा है ना, और जीत गया सबसे। तो हैव दिस टाइप्स ऑफ इंटरवेंशन एंड ट्राई दैट एंड पैक योर हेल्दी फूड इन ए बेटर वे। And you can do interventions of breastfeeding, complementary feeding का जो है उसके ऊपर आप इंटरवेंशन करो। What can you do so that ये जो लोग एक ये चीज है कि थूक देते हैं बच्चे, ये बात हर जगह इग्नोर हो रही है, किसी भी मैसेज के अंदर अच्छे से नहीं आता। Do some project to promote how to introduce complementary feeding.
Yes.
So there are so many we can discuss individually. You're looking at the time.
I think Suparna ma'am wants to add a comment.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you for the nice observation, Professor Agarwal. Yeah, this was an observational study. So we did not give any intervention through indigenous food. It was a natural setup where we went and we checked what the children were eating and saw whether indigenous food was taken or not. So we were not giving any intervention. And the messages that we learned was also what local food the community said they were eating. So we don't want to promote anything specific, but we got the recipe from the community. So that is what my point is. We have to contextualize the message, and I totally agree कि अगर हरी पत्तेदार सब्जी वो कम्युनिटी ही खाता है चावल के साथ, और उसको वैल्यू एडिशन हम करा सकते हैं. And similarly for the Anganwadi food also, that's exactly what my point is. If children like nice packages, we have to package their own indigenous food. Indigenous here means local food, which is grown locally, which is seasonal. And we did not actually give anything. This was not an interventional study. This was a simple observational study where we saw what the children were eating and what they were not eating. And if they were not eating, why was it so? And that is how the message needs to be packaged. So I totally agree with your point on packaging healthy diets and making them presentable through behavior change.
I understood your point. I mean, it was
Yeah.
not intervention, but this was
No.
a natural intervention going on in the community.
No, it is a
So,
natural setup. There was hardly any,
natural.
as you have
It is
seen,
a,
only 40%. Yeah, only 40% were actually consuming their indigenous food as complementary feed. And it was prolonged breastfeeding was an issue with this community.
long
So it
period.
yeah, so that was the real challenge. And the education, the messaging was not going properly through the Anganwadi workers. So as you have rightly pointed out, capacity building of Anganwadi workers is equally important because they themselves have to be convinced about the key messages that we are giving to them. So we are
Yes, yes.
expecting too much from them, and I totally agree with you that we cannot make the frontline workers do everything. And
Yes.
diet counseling is a very specified job which requires communication skills. So that was a real challenge. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for giving us such an practical information. If we want to work in the community, then it is very important. Thank you so much. Now we have come to the end of the webinar, and we have Ms. Ankha to propose the vote of thanks.
On behalf of Department of Clinical Nutrition, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all our eminent speakers, Dr. Anuradha Khadilkar, Dr. Suparna Ghosh, and Dr. Arun Agarwal, sir, for sparing time from their busy schedule and gracing us with their talk and sharing their knowledge. I am immensely thankful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Dr. Shashank, sir, Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Nitin Kadam, sir, Registrar, Dr. Rajesh Goel, sir, and Director Dr. Mansi Thakur ma'am for always being there and supporting and encouraging us for organizing such a meaningful webinar. Finally, I would like to thank the wonderful participants who have joined us in this webinar. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Last but not the least, I would like to thank the entire SBS team and the NSS unit for their support and Mr. Anil for the IT support. Request a few minutes from all to kindly send your feedback forms for the event. The link is being sent through your mail and WhatsApp, and after filling the feedback forms, you will get the participation certificates. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. So now we request you to fill the feedback form, and then after filling the feedback form, you will get your certificate, participation certificate. So please do fill your feedback form to get the participation certificate. Now can, yeah.